Right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of the Audit Committee, which I believe is being webcast or recorded. So we're very grateful for the technology. My name is Councillor Rob Logan. I'm the chair of this committee. Thank you to everyone, members, officers, and the public gallery. I'm not aware of any planned fire alarm. So if the alarm sounds, please exit via the safest route and meet in the space between the cathedral and the public library. So we will introduce members of the committee first. I believe we have a couple of substitutions which will be evident when we get that far. Nick.
Nicholas Coombs, Westbury and Henley's Vice Chair.
Jonathan Hucker, Stockwood Ward.
Ed Fraser, Green Party Councillor for Eastville Ward.
Ellie Freeman, Green Party, Bedminster.
Shona Gentry, Green Party, Lawrence Hill.
James Crawford, Green Party, Bishopston, Ashley Down.
Jo Williams, Independent Member.
Peter Bray, Independent Member.
Councillor Fabian Beckles, Labour Member for St George Troopers Hill.
Tom Blenkinsop, Avonmouth and Lawrence Western Ward.
So I believe we have apologies from Councillor Wilcox and Councillor Stone, and substituted by the people who are in their places. Thank you very much, and you're very welcome. I don't know if we normally record officer apologies, but the reason for this space here is there is a senior officer away day at the moment. So I think Andy Rovery would normally be here without that happening. Also, I believe Aldo Zanetti has had a family emergency, so Simba will be presenting the reports on risk management. And Sally Self has had something else urgent come up, so Ben is all by himself when we come to the finance report, so thank you for that. So I think that's... Any other apologies before we make further progress? Thank you. And any declarations of interest that members or others want to draw attention to? Okay, thank you very much. So if we go to the minutes of the last meeting in May, do councillors have any comments on the accuracy or arising come with that?
Yeah, just two things to flag. So on page 10.4, it contains an action that just reads Alison Taylor. So I just wanted to check the specific action that you were asked to do and if that can be noted in the minutes. And then page 11, it says that point E contains an action to ensure that there's sufficient scrutiny for key items at the September 2026 meeting. It doesn't say how it would be achieved. I'm assuming that's achieved by the meeting being started an hour earlier and therefore the total time being extended, but it'd be good just to clarify that.
Yes, I was going to cover that on Chair's business, but yes, the September meeting will start an hour early for that reason. Sorry, I think Joe had a comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just a small item, really, item for correction. Page 14, draft annual governance statement. Item 3 there, there's just a reversal of letters. I think we mean to say the significant DSG deficit, not DGS. Thank you. Is that okay?
Yes, thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much. Following the agenda, then we have an action sheet. There is a response to, I think, each of the actions on the action sheet, and there's also unusually an appendix which goes into some more detail on the issue of email addresses within the housing management system. So good to see that we've got a response to each of those things. Did members have comments or further information? Ed.
Yeah, apologies. I've got quite a few things on both these, so I'll take my action sheet ones and then let other people respond before coming to the NEC housing.
Sorry, pause. I've been advised that I didn't formally ask whether we were happy with the minutes that, as commented. Are we happy with the minutes?
Yes.
Perfect, thank you. Sorry, Ed, carry on.
Okay, so I'll give my questions on the action sheet first.
Okay.
And then once everyone's had a chance to go and any further ones and that, I'll come back for questions on the NEC housing update. Okay. So page 18, action 6 doesn't appear to include any kind of mitigation. So it'd be good to clarify that first.
Sorry, action 6 on the work programme, the issue about there being sufficient time in September.
It just doesn't specify what the action is. But if you're going to cover that in your chair's notes anyway, then that's fine. We'll cover that then. Page 19, on action 10, it doesn't actually detail what work is ongoing. So Simba and I did have a useful discussion a couple of weeks ago on online about some of the accessibility issues in previous agenda papers, but it didn't include, this doesn't appear to include any tangible actions, for example, changes in writing processes or additional training or anything like that. And on page 21, action 18 doesn't include any kind of progress update. I realise Aldo's not here, so won't be able to provide one, but I just wanted that to be noted.
On the corporate risk report, we have quite a lot of time today to go into an update on each of the actions where there's been change. So I think we should be able to, we will definitely cover the issue of deteriorating and improving risks. On the issue of accessibility, I know you have been progressing that, Simba.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much, Councillor Fraser, for having the conversation. I thought that the test will be on future reports. So we are working to improve on that. So what we're doing is we are reviewing the way we present diagrams, the way we use language, and we are also exploring whether some of the work that we are doing in internal audit will need to be engaged with other services as well, so that there's consistent in terms of what comes here, because there's no, it won't benefit anyone if we just focus on just our internal audit reports. So there is something that we need to have conversation with other services to ensure that that element, and I absolutely recognize that, and we are. I think you see that the internal audit reports have changed. We have taken away some of the colors and all that is just plain. So there is something that we are working on. So there will be, the test will be in future meetings, Chair. But absolutely, work is ongoing.
Thank you, Simba. So you wanted to come. You wanted to ask if other people had comments on the action sheet before we go to the appendix. So did anyone else have any questions on the action sheet itself? No? Then back to you, Ed.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I just don't want to take up too much space. Just a couple of small questions on page 23 and then a more substantive comment on page 25. So on page 23, under phase 2, it says this group will have reconnected their account. So there appears to be a grammar error, so it'd be good just to clarify that. And I want to just say thank you for the supplying us with the full comms and deployment plan. It's very useful to for members to have sight of that. Can I just check that the external comms that were due to be sent out to affected residents in bands 1 and 2 yesterday were sent out? Because it's not marked as complete yet, so just clarifying if that action did take place.
I don't think we've been informed of that, so I think we'll have to take that.
Officers who have to take away and back to the action.
We will get an answer to that, Ed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And then more substantively on page 25, there was a detail that did concern me. I mean, obviously, the nature of this report, I'm going to come back to us. We've discussed those concerns at previous meetings, but it says that the project has positive reputationally for the council. Is it, and I quote, demonstrates proactive data management and improvement of core systems, strengthening trust with residents and stakeholders. And I just found that to be quite an astounding phrase, because the project is only necessary because over 3,500 residents' accounts were effectively bungled to the point where for months and months, lots of these residents are having to rely on multiple different accounts in order to access, quite basic services. So I really don't see how that can be spun as being something that strengthens trust with residents or is somehow good for the council's reputation. It appears to be clutching at straws. So I just wanted to flag that comment as I thought it was quite exceptional.
Thank you for drawing attention to that, Ed. I think you are quite right to say that this is not the council's finest hour, and lots of members of the public have been disadvantaged by having to operate across 2 different email addresses. They're very a very unprofessional way.
Sorry.
For me.
Yes, so it is under reputational risks. It says, are there reputational implications, either positive or negative? And it's the paragraph underneath.
And a comment from Nick, and then Joe.
Thanks. I doubt we'll have anyone in the room to answer the question, so on for the action log. The very first sentence of this report: during the migration of housing applications, existing applicant records were not matched and reused. Instead, new person records were created. Okay, so that has described the problem. What it hasn't done is given us any idea of why or how the problem came about. I mean, was that a choice? Was that an accident? Was that simply not considered and a thing which happened? It is good to have the subsequent report of how this is trying to be mitigated, but there is no explanation or indeed curiosity as to how the basic issue arose. And I think that is quite important in a report to answer the question, what happened and why. The why is the important bit, so it doesn't happen again.
I think there isn't anyone in the room who can answer that. So I think we will specifically ask for a response from the Executive Director of Housing to say why was a decision taken to go live with two different customer systems. I think there was a question from Joe.
Thank you, Chair. No, it's more a suggestion in response to Councillor Fraser's point. Would it be better then to say restoring trust, perhaps, with residents and stakeholders? Would that be more palatable?
Is that a question to me?
It can be, yes, and the Chair.
So it's not for me to rewrite and amend reports provided by executive directors. That's not my role as a councillor in this committee. But I don't think it would be appropriate for me to kind of relitigate in that way. But what I would say is, I'd simply repeat what I said, that to suggest that this is something that improves trust, I think is actually quite a ludicrous statement to be making. It is obviously disappointing that that the executive director, nor the officer of the report can be here today, but because I would ask for some kind of justification of that statement.
And a question from Tom.
So more of a comment than a question. Much as it pains me to no, I agree that this does not strengthen trust, and I think that is quite a thing to say. It would also be useful, I appreciate that we don't necessarily have people here who can answer these questions, but noting around the true duplicates and how the new duplicate parties are being created. I note that it says it's being addressed through strengthened processes and targeted staff training, but there's not really very much detail on what those strengthened processes look like and how they've been strengthened in comparison to what we had before. And appreciating there's only so much detail you can put into documents, I would still be quite interested to know where these improvements have come from and what's really keeping us from resolving the true duplicates at this time.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think we are grateful to Housing for producing a larger than normal summary of the situation, but I think there are still some unanswered questions, particularly in terms of why that decision was made and how it's being responded to by users. Thank you very much. Great. Right. So, Chair's business. Three things I wanted to draw attention to. First of all, our next meeting on the 29th of September will start at 1 o'clock. The reason for this is twofold. This is the first year that we are seeking to progress the completion of our annual accounts by a November deadline rather than a January deadline. So our September meeting is really important in terms of that process because there are a number of things that have to happen that we have to give a view on that we can't give at any other meeting. So it's important that was a busy meeting anyway. Also, there are a couple of things that we had asked to come to this meeting that wasn't able to happen for diary management reasons. In particular, we had asked for a discussion around the capital programme, which I think is important to us for a number of reasons, and it was impossible to get the right officers here today. So that item has been deferred to September as well, which makes a busy meeting even more busy than it was going to be. So that's the reason that we start earlier, and consequently, colleagues who are members of the Values and Ethics Subcommittee, that meeting also starts a little bit earlier than it would have done in order to accommodate that. Sorry, but I don't think there's anything else that we can do other than having an additional meeting, which shouldn't be necessary. But there is quite a lot to get through, particularly on a statutory accounts perspective. The second thing, I'd like to draw members' awareness to a decision by the Information Commissioner's Office in response to a particular FOI decision, which will come up, I think, probably in the public forum, which involved a request by a member of the public to release a report which the council, this relates to the company called Stepping Up, which we have spent some considerable time on in the past, where there was an investigation report produced by the internal audit, and it's important to clarify that that's not an internal audit report that we normally would receive in this meeting, but an investigation report by the part of the internal audit team that do investigations into allegations of fraud, and those reports are not normally published. There is a thing called a Section 36 exemption, which is circumstances where releasing a report would prejudice public affairs, and the council has historically relied on that justification when a report of this nature is requested. The judgment by the ICO is that exemption needs to be more precise and more narrowly defined. So effectively, in order to use that justification appropriately, that the council or public authority would need to identify specifically what the prejudice would be. In other words, to say there is a particular content of information that must not enter the public domain, rather than saying that this type of report would normally not be in the public domain. So I wanted to draw members' attention to that because that's an important clarification of when that exemption happens, and the council has accepted that position, and that report has been placed in the public domain. So I wanted to, I'm not really taking questions at this point on, but I just wanted to make members aware that that had happened. Not actually because I think there's anything in the public domain that councillors weren't aware of before. Members who were members of the committee at that time may remember that there was a confidential briefing of members of the audit committee on that report. And subsequently there was, hang on a second, and subsequently there was a report completed by colleagues in Grant Thornton, which is also on the agenda for other reasons today, following requests by members of the public. So I'm not persuaded that this information brings new information into the sight of members of the committee that members of the committee weren't aware of before. However, I did want to draw members' attention to that because the treatment of how we treat confidential information and when information should go into the public domain is an important part of our job. So I'm grateful to the ICO for making that decision and that justification as clear as they have. So it's good that we have that clarity, and it's equally good that the council has accepted that position. That should draw a line under at the application of that exemption. But I wanted members to be aware that that had happened. I was hoping this wouldn't be a subject of debate, but I can see there are members who want to state a view in this case. So I will take Nick and Tom, who've indicated that view, if they can express themselves briefly. Nick.
Thank you, Chair. So to be absolutely clear, there was a report which the Audit Committee asked to see, and we were told by officers that we were not allowed to see this report. But the Information Commissioner believes that the content of this report is absolutely fine for the general public to see. So there is a very clear mismatch between what our officers think should be made available, even on a confidential basis, to the Audit Committee, and what a separate authority, the Information Commissioner, believes is available to the general public. We have our Head of Legal Services here, so were we to have a discussion, I would be asking her if her team has learnt anything from that different interpretation, and if there's any reflection or changes.
I think they manifestly have, because that judgment has been accepted, and that report has been put in the public domain, and that definition has been accepted as relevant. I don't think there's anything more to say on that. Tom.
I will try and be brief. I agree with the thrust of Nick's point. I shall say, I think he has a very relevant point there. I would also say that, quite aside from the exact content of the report and whether it came to us or not, it is quite clear from how this has been drawn out that this particular FOI request and this particular bit of information, and it's not the only one, that has been subject to this dragging out. And now it's gone to the ICO, who have promptly, to be blunt, told off the council and said, we've gotten it wrong. I think it is worth reflecting. It is great that we've been so much more, that we've improved our rate of response to FOIs. My concern is the ones that remain left behind because they touch on areas that this council does not want to touch. We have a commitment as a council to transparency. It's one of the areas I think most of the political parties actually do have an agreement on, that we should be more transparent. It is very clear that in this case, we were not.
I'm conscious that do any other members wish to make any comments on that subject? Okay, thank you very much, everyone. The third point of Chair's business is I wanted to, as we're going into public forum, I just want to reiterate that it is always important that members, officers and members of the public treat each other with respect and act professionally. And I want to underline that I'm not making that comment about any particular individual. I'm certainly not making that comment about any individual who is in the public forum today. Yes, I'm not making that comment on any of the many individuals who've drawn attention today. However, we have had a couple of incidents involving people who aren't here today that have gone quite close to the line of behaviour that does need to be challenged. So I did want to say that when behaviour is disrespectful to members, officers or other members of the public, then that will be drawn attention to. Anyway, thank you very much. That concludes Chair's business. And we move to public forum. So we have up to 30 minutes to deal with questions and statements that have been published in relation to that. I don't believe that Joanna Booth and John Pearce or Mike Oldreeve are in the public forum. I'm fairly sure that Dan Aykroyd is. So you have some time first, Dan, for supplementary questions in relation to your questions.
So my first supplementary question is regarding my first question, which is about the Housing IT Programme Oversight Board. So the answer given was that the information for that board is, the programme uses a dedicated council SharePoint site to store documents related to the programme board. On June 17th, I made this FOI request. Please can you provide me with the progress reports for the IT transformation programme that were sent to the Programme Oversight Board since the project's inception. On June 18th, the next day, I got this response. We are refusing your request on the following grounds. Section 12 exceeds cost limit. Supplementary question is, Why is the council unable to process quite simple FOI requests when the records being requested are being stored in a dedicated council SharePoint site?
So, just so I understand the situation, Dan, you've made a request in relation to the housing IT programme, and you haven't been given that information because a judgment has been taken that it would exceed the cost limit to compile that information. That's what's happened.
I can give you the full backstory if that helps. In May, Joanna Booth made an FOI request, which officers struggled to respond to, with multiple deadline extensions being engaged because of the difficulty of processing the request. In June, she received a response saying that too many documents had been retrieved and that it was going to take too long to process the request. I made a subsequent FOI request that reduced the scope of the documents requested to just the IT reports and removed a few other requests, which made it, according to the answer given today, all the documents I requested should be in the SharePoint site. What's happening is the council's coming up with what looks like an excuse to deny the FOI request. So my question is, if these documents are stored in a SharePoint site, whatever that is, why is the council unable to retrieve them? I note that in part of Joe's denial and in part of my denial, the council was relying on an exemption that says that it's going to take us too long to process the records, figuring out which parts of them need to be exempted. That was the subject of another ICO decision recently, where the ICO put in quite blunt terms that the council was not following the right guidance, and the ICO ordered the council to stop considering the time, or stop looking at how much time it would take to exempt the documents as part of the processing time. That's not allowed. That's why my FOI request was refused. But again, I want to understand why simple FOI requests for documents that are stored in a programme board's SharePoint site cannot be delivered by this council.
I wasn't aware of that situation, Dan, and the facts as you present them are quite surprising. I would be surprised that I would be surprised that it would take longer than 18 hours to resolve the inquiry that you're making. So I think we do need to ask for further clarification of actually whether that can be released to Dan, or what precisely the reasons are why that can't be done.
FOI requests, so you can see how they've been processed, and you can get back to me on them individually.
Okay, that will be tremendously helpful, Dan. Thank you. Okay. Do you have a second question?
Yes, I do. My second question is regarding the question about the stepping up internal report. Can I have some clarity on the answer given? Because my question was specifically about when you, as chair, learned about the internal audit exception report, not about the members in general. Is my understanding that you learnt about it on the 10th of April this year? Sorry, 10th of April 2025. A correct understanding of the answer given?
Yes.
Okay. In the years previous to that, you personally chose to block a large number of public forum items on the grounds that they were defamatory, offensive, or not within the remit of this committee. You did so in the time period after the report was written, but before you learned of it. The internal audit report shows that those public forum items were true, and that the monitoring officer had decided to cover up a procurement scandal that resulted in a lot of public money not delivering value for money. Given that the internal audit report subsequently confirmed the substance of the concerns raised in those public forum items, do you accept that it was wrong to prevent the committee from hearing those concerns on the grounds that they were defamatory? And will you now allow the committee to examine why those concerns were not properly addressed at the time?
I don't actually accept that those issues were not dealt with appropriately at the time. I think the view that an investigation report would not be shareable I think, was the council's legal opinion at that time. I'm grateful to the ICO for clarifying the terms in which that should be shared, and that's enormously helpful. And I think that will help draw a line in terms of where that information should be put in the public domain. And if that information was known at the time, that report clearly would have been shared, at least with members of the committee in verbatim form, if not published earlier. And in hindsight, maybe it should have been. Or in hindsight, it should have been, given the new advice that we've had from the ICO. But I don't think anything has changed in relation to how the issue was handled. Thank you, Dan. Did you have another? Did you have another? Now, I appreciate you have 2 supplementaries, which you've had. I'm conscious, given there isn't anyone else here, if you had a supplementary question on the final issue, on the final question.
I've worked it into my statement, which will be a few minutes longer. So
okay.
I'll move on to that.
Okay, that's great. So as there's no one else here for the questions, we move to statement. So Dan, you can read your statement.
I should explain what is happening. The law is mostly being followed at the council. The problem is that when you get into fine enough detail, what exactly the law says becomes a little bit fuzzy, and that it becomes quite difficult to decide what the most appropriate course of action is. So in the laws and policies that the council follows, when the law isn't clear, or there are 2 laws that are incompatible, a senior officer needs to make a public interest test. In a public interest test, the officer is meant to consider which of the possible interpretations of contradictory laws or policies, which choice would best serve the interests of the public. For the public interest test surrounding FOI requests and whether information is exempt from being published in council, the public interest test is meant to start with a default of open or transparency. That is where the process is failing. It's failing because the council treats the public as an enemy, because the council has decided to hide information to avoid political embarrassment. We saw that with Stepping Up. We now know that Deputy Mayor Asher Craig had used her position to direct council resources to people she knew by giving them very well-paying jobs where they would have built up Asher Craig's political standing in Bristol. We saw that Christine Bamford, a cryptocurrency promoter, pushed for more funding to be spent on the scheme and including funding from local bodies, including the police service, the fire service, Bristol City Council and Bristol Energy were all paying large fees to her company. It was obviously in the public interest for the internal report to be made public, but the council has fought publishing information at every step of the way, including the current chair of this committee, who blocked multiple public forum items which should never have been blocked. Myself and others have made FOI requests for the documents sent to the Programme Oversight Board for the Housing IT project. I would like to note the answer given to my first question, which is, what storage system is used to store documents to that board? The answer, the programme uses a dedicated council SharePoint site, which should show that the documents should be easily retrievable. The officer who is trying to process that FOI request appears to have been searching in people's email inboxes. They don't seem to have been aware that a dedicated SharePoint site exists and that documents could be retrieved from that quite easily. But the individual teams are not the people blocking requests. The blocking happens at a higher level, where people who are trained on how to refuse FOI requests use an excuse that sounds possibly plausible, but the ICO usually overrules them. My third question was about learnings from ICO decisions. The answer given says, the decision notices are received and reviewed by the Central Disclosures team, and therefore any learning that needs to be taken from them are factored into the support and guidance that the team provides the service areas in the application of exemptions. I believe that answer is just complete bollocks. There's just no other way of putting it. The council is still using the excuse that too many documents have been found, and they're reviewing them all for whether any information should be exempt will take too long. That is explicitly against ICO guidance. It is also explicitly contradicted by ICO decisions a couple of months ago. The Council is taking positions that sound reasonable in isolation, but put together show a clear refusal to prevent the public from having access to information that is in the public interest to know. What is the point of the FRI laws if an authority can simply refuse to provide documents where they would be politically embarrassing? I've not got them yet, but I've got a strong suspicion of what the Housing IT Project Board records will say. They will reveal the terrible state of the Housing Department and show that a political decision was made to hide the scale of the problems before the 2024 elections by breaching many laws about transparency in decision-making and spending. They will show that the IT system just wasn't really being worked on in 2023 and that there was never any chance of meeting the 2024 delivery date. They will show that the Council procured the C365 fire safety information system and public knowledge of that, of which the Council officers concealed from the public by not disclosing that the C365 system had been purchased until the end of 2025, 2 years after it had been procured. Councillor Coombs, I think you wanted to know what was going on in the IT project. It's just been complete chaos. The project started late and they've been firefighting ever since the Barton House evacuation, where I'll send you the details and the timeline of what I think's happened separately. It's too complicated to say off the top of my head. The political choice to hide the scale of the problems is ongoing. The Council is still not storing information about damp and mould in homes. That damp and mould is causing asthma and eczema in children. And due to how eczema manifests in people of colour, this has resulted in some children being taken into care as the eczema was confused with child abuse. I would like to ask committee members, have you paid any attention to any of the appalling things that are going on in the world? We are in a time of crisis. We must have faith in our government. This audit committee must fulfil its duty and make sure that the Council doesn't pervert the law through blocking inconvenient FRI requests. And finally, I need to comment on the Chair's request for respect. I have been lied to. I have had my public forum statements blocked. I've had this Chair tell me that it's not within the remit of this committee to look at what decisions are being taken by the monitoring officer. How do you expect me to respect you and your authority when you lie to the public constantly? This is just outrageous. This is why nobody else bothers to attend. I live 5 minutes away. If I didn't live 5 minutes away, I wouldn't bother. This Council is absolutely disgusting. I'm sorry, there's just no other way to do it, and this audit committee needs to do something about it.
Thank you, Dan. This brings us to the end of the public forum. You wanted to make a comment?
I've just heard from a statement that somehow this committee is being accused of lying. Is this correct?
This is public forum, so Dan is quite within his rights to express his views and the evidence that he's put forward. Believe it or not, I try and maximise the amount of information that is published in public forum, and that any questions or redactions are kept to an absolute minimum. It's really important that Dan has the freedom to publish his reports. So this does bring us to the end of public forum. Thank you to Dan for coming to talk about his issues that he's raised, and thank you to the other members of the public who submitted statements and submitted questions, and I hope they've been answered accurately. So the next item is the work programme, which is our opportunity to comment on the topics that we expect to bring to future reports. The thing worth noting is the length of items scheduled for the September meeting, both those relating to the audit findings, as well as the deferred item on the capital programme, and also the reports from the subsidiary companies, which also need to come at that time. You had a comment? Sorry, Nick.
Yes, as the capital programme was a request from us rather than a calendar obligation, presumably it could be moved to any meeting. If we think that there's a risk that September 1 will be so overwhelming, it doesn't need to be there?
Yes, we could do that. I'm very conscious that that was a request that we made, that we wanted more information on that in response to previous audits. But yes, we could do that later if that was a wish of the committee. I'll take other comments for you first, Ed.
On a practical note for that, given that it's unlikely we'll be able to hear that today, where we've got a slightly thinner agenda, if we were to move that to the next available meeting in November, there would then be the exact same amount of items on the agenda as there are in September anyway. So unless it to be pushed back by 4 further months, which I don't think is desirable, it's logistically likely to be a moot point at this stage.
If there are no other comments, I think Ed's conclusion is correct. The same number of items would be there, and therefore we will try and accommodate within the September meeting as we've set out. You had a question, Joe?
Sorry, just briefly, Chair. I'm just wondering about the March 27 programme there. I mean, are we likely to get the date for that soon, do you think? I'm just wondering, it's going to be looming once September comes, and it'll be good to get that date of March confirmed, if possible, please.
Completely included it on the sheet, which we should have done.
Okay, that's fine. I mean, it's not the 27th, is it? No, I mean that's the year, isn't it?
Hang on.
Yeah, March 27.
If you bear, it's the 23rd of March.
Thank you very much. Great.
We don't put the actual day.
Yeah.
We just put the month and the
Sure.
year.
Okay. Any other comments on that item? Okay, thank you. We now move to an audit topic. So colleagues from Grant Thornton are here to give us an update on the external audit progress. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick summary update from me today.
Sorry, could I ask you to give your name when you speak for the first time?
Katie Wybray, External Audit Manager. Just a quick summary from me today. Our final accounts audit has commenced in June as planned, and as at the end of July, we are progressing well with the planned audit procedures. As noted in the report, we did receive a final draft set of accounts later than planned. So this did delay some of our initial procedures. However, at this stage, we are still continuing to work collaboratively with the finance team. And although we do have a big challenge ahead of us to give us, we're working hard on both sides to give us the best chance of meeting our planned deadline of the end of September. We do have a detailed project plan in place, and we are working closely with finance to ensure any potential blockers or delays are identified at the earliest opportunity. So at this stage, 5 or 6 weeks into the audit, there's nothing significant for us to bring to your attention. And as mentioned, we are planning to report our detailed audit findings within the audit findings report at the September audit committee. The rest of this report just sets out our usual sector updates, so I don't propose to talk through this in detail, but we're happy to take any questions on the report today. Thank you.
I'm pleased to see there are many ready, starting with Nick.
Thank you. 2 questions then. Normally, I would say this report could have been an email, but I'm grateful that you've come today because I did have a question on stepping up. But first, on the report. So when we met on the 28th of May, I challenged our council officers, will you be able to meet this new tight timescale? And they said that yes, in 3 weeks' time we'll be able to deliver the paperwork. And no, in 3 weeks' time they did not deliver the paperwork. So I just wanted to ask if any of our officers are able to explain that, and if our auditors can say if that's affected subsequently the programme.
You happy to comment on that, Ben?
Thank you, Councillor. The reason for the delay, well, first of all, we did deliver a set of accounts during for the initial deadline. They were subsequently revised before publication. And the reason for that delay was basically because of the NEC implementation caused a bit of a bottleneck in the process of closing down the accounts, and that meant that the quality assurance processes that we planned to do were delayed, and so unfortunately we had to revise the set of accounts that we sent to the auditors.
And is there a knock-on effect to the programme?
Yep, so in terms of the delay to the account, so as Ben mentioned, we did receive a pre-published set of accounts, so we were able to start work on some other areas and move our plan around. There was a delay to some of our kind of key procedures, such as the kind of TB, trial balance, general ledger checks, and doing the full review of the accounts. So we did have delays, but we were able to move things around so that our team were occupied and were not wasted resource. I think it was about just over a week that we got the final set of accounts. So yes, there was a slight delay. The audit team were able to stay occupied during that period.
Thank you. And my second question relates to this audit investigation report that has recently been published. And I wanted to ask if Grant Thornton were aware of that at the time of their investigation. And had read it, of course, not just aware, had seen the contents.
Chair, I'm Barry Morris, the Regional Audit Partner for the Public Sector team, and I was responsible for the audit back in 24-25, which is when our work was undertaken. That was reported in our Auditor's Annual Report for the year ending 31st March 24, that was presented to committee in November 2024. So I'll take some licence because there is no programme of activity in relation to stepping up or the investigation in relation to our 25-26 audit programme. But to confirm, we were not aware of the internal audit report that was produced, and therefore we did not read it or take it into account in forming our judgments. We have subsequently received that report, and we've been through that and found that the conclusions and recommendations were similar or complementary to the findings that we had. So from the perspective that...
Please, can I ask people in the public forum not to comment on presentations as they occur?
Thank you, Chair. So from the perspective of Audit Committee and those charged with governance, you have two different reports that have come at it from two different angles. We've looked at it from issues that were raised by members of the public as part of an objection, and then we've considered the impact upon our value for money work, and internal audit have undertaken it from a different perspective. And as I've said, some of those conclusions and recommendations do not contradict each other, they do complement each other. There may be different recommendations within them, but we are satisfied that there is nothing that was reported in either of them that would contradict the other. Happy to take any questions.
It is reassuring that both investigations are not contradictory. So was there a time at which BCC knew that you were investigating the programme as part of a question on the accounts? And I guess you couldn't have asked for a report that you didn't know existed, but equally it wasn't volunteered. Or did you not inform BCC that this investigation was happening?
I'm afraid that's probably a question for BCC officers rather than myself.
but BCC were aware that there was an investigation by Grant Thornton into the Stepping Up programme.
Bristol City Council would have been aware of the investigation and the inquiries that we were making as a result of objection received, because the process of an objection is it needs to be copied in to the council officers.
I think Jonathan was next.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you for the report. I'd like to talk about the indexation of non-investment assets. You've reported that the indexation would apply to most property, plant and equipment. It appears to me that this is quite a substantial undertaking, because you would obviously need to have a current cost or a current value of those assets at the start of the year in order to apply indexation to them. And it seems to me that this is very similar to an old accounting standard, SAP 16, Statement of Standard Accounting Practice 16, which was withdrawn a long time ago as it was discredited. I wonder if council officers have the capacity to undertake this work, whether it's a substantial piece of work. I note that in the report it says that the council themselves must select the indices. So you could have a situation where, you probably will have a situation where different authorities select different indices for the same type of assets. So it all seems fraught with difficulty and completely pointless to me, and I would just like your view on that.
So in terms of the indices that the council have used, they obviously have had support from their internal valuer, who has been instrumental in the process in terms of coming up with and determining those indices to apply. We would expect to see different indices used across the country because of regional factors. At the moment, we are kind of in the early stages of looking at this, so I can't comment on the indices that the council has used or the process they followed, but I think officers can probably give you a bit more at this stage.
Thank you. I wonder if it might be useful to share a white paper that we wrote exactly on this change to the CIPFA code. We wrote it back, I think, in February, explaining our approach to 25-26. Sorry, can you hear me now? Yeah. So I was just explaining, we wrote a white paper on how exactly we were going to implement this change on under the CIPFA code on indexation a few months ago after the announcement was made. So I wonder if it would be useful, rather than me trying to recall those details, to provide that to yourselves.
I think that would be very helpful, Ben. Thank you. You'd finished, John.
Yes. I would just like to know if you think that this extra work might compromise the deadlines that we need to meet for producing the accounts?
I don't believe so. I think actually the new requirements, the indexation requirements, the changes in the CIPFA code actually pull back a lot of the requirements. I think we were, and I would have to confirm this, but it's in the white paper, it actually scales back a lot of the revaluation program that we had in place. I think it's every 5 years, and now every third year it's a desktop valuation, which is actually less frequent valuations than we had for many of our assets already. So in a way, it might have actually helped with the deadlines.
Okay, thank you. I think Shona was next.
Thank you. Sorry, I just had a follow-up question on what Councillor Coombs was asking about, because my understanding is that the external audit report says that there was sort of nothing of interest on the topic. Is that correct?
Sorry, can you repeat the first bit?
This is on the Stepping Up programme.
Yeah.
Yeah. So is that correct? The report says there was nothing of interest when the external audit report was done on it?
Yeah, so what I'm saying is that the internal audit review looked at the Stepping Up programme through one particular lens. We looked at it through the external audit lens, as I said, both in responding to an objection that was received from a member of the public, and also from our value for money perspective. So we're coming at it from slightly different angles, which is why the focus and the overall conclusions may appear different, but it's because they're coming at it from a different angle and that different lens. But when we've stepped back and looked at the overall conclusions, recommendations that were there, we did make recommendations in relation to the way that programme was administered. Internal audit just went into a bit more depth, which is what you would genuinely expect to be the case.
And yeah, forgive me, I mean, obviously I'm not normally on audit committee, so forgive me if I'm asking questions that have already been rehashed, but could we get the external report released so that we can look at it properly?
The external audit report is already on your website, so it's went to the meeting in November of 2024.
Okay, thank you. So, and then I had a separate question just about the value for money assessment that you're doing. And I just wondered if someone could clarify a bit about, I know it says it notes planned interviews, sort of like, but obviously you've only got a couple of months to do that because it's meant to be presented in September, is that correct? So sort of, can you explain a bit more about that process, how many interviews, what that looks like, how in-depth that report is?
Yeah, so thank you for your question. So at this stage, we're undertaking the initial interviews. So our two risk areas were around, that we identified at the planning stage, were around financial sustainability, so particularly around arrangements to effectively reduce the DSG deficit, and then secondly around improvement economy efficiency and effectiveness with regards to the findings made by the regulator for social housing. We also have to look at a number of other areas that we don't raise as significant weaknesses at the planning, so in particular around governance and a number of procedures. So we initially start with interviews to cover off those risk areas. So that will be, we talk to head of internal audit, legal, 151 officer, chief exec, and then we will do more deeper dives into the areas where we need to focus our work on. So that may be director of children's services, adult services. So it evolves as the process goes on, depending on what we identify in those early interviews and the areas of focus. It's undertaken by a separate value for money team within Grant Thornton who work with us. So they have a plan in place to undertake those interviews and then determine who further they need to speak to, depending on what comes out of the initial inquiries. Hopefully that helps.
Thank you. I think Ed was next.
Thanks very much, and thank you very much for bringing this report. Just returning to one of the questions that Councillor Coombs asked earlier to do with the delivery of the accounts being delayed by eight days. So you've clarified that members of your team were able to be redeployed to different tasks during that time period on the on the project, and in the report it clarifies that the delay, we're not expecting it to impact the anticipated completion date at this time. So can I just confirm that there aren't therefore any penalty fees due from the council to Grant Thornton with respect to that delay?
So at this stage, we're working closely with the council to ensure that we continue to work on track and meet our proposed plan and deadlines. So at this stage, it's difficult for me to answer that question because we are early in that process. Obviously, if things go on further than planned, that's when the conversations happen in terms of additional fees. But at this stage, we are on track with a big challenge ahead of us.
Okay, thank you. So just to clarify, so it's not about whether any penalty fees may be applied later for, let's say, delays beyond September 30th because of issues that arise following the publication of the report. I'm specifically referring to that particular issue where that deadline wasn't met. But so what I'm clarifying is because you are able to redeploy staff to other parts of the project, can I confirm that that in and of itself is not to result in any penalty fees?
Yeah, at this stage, we're not proposing any additional fees due to the delays in the accounts. Yeah, we feel like we will be able to, we're on track at the moment to hit our plan. Yeah, so at this stage, that would not lead to additional fees.
Sorry, Barry.
Chair, thank you. So, Councillor Fraser, it's a really good question. So I know last year's additional fees and the time delays that we had are paramount in members' minds. So we are in a completely different place this year than we were last year. We have a more stable finance team. The accounts that have been prepared. Yes, they didn't meet the slightly earlier deadline of the sort of mid-June, but they were published in full by the end of June. So the council did meet its statutory obligations. What we were trying to do was be a bit greedy in terms of trying to get an extra week of work in by getting those accounts earlier. The reason for that, as Katie has explained, is so that we can deliver by the statutory backstop date is the end of January next year. As a firm, we want to move all of our clients forward to the end of November this year, which is in line with what the backstop date is this year. If we're moving into the conversation of additional fees are being paid, then that means that we've failed in our project to deliver all of our councils. So 35 councils that we need to deliver the audit for. So if something goes wrong in one, that has a domino effect in others. So we're confident and we're constantly monitoring the team. We're holding officers to account. We've got appropriate escalation arrangements in place that should things start to go wrong, then we will raise those concerns. But from my perspective, I'm not involved this year because I don't have that detailed knowledge of the individual project level, but from my oversight of all of the councils, Bristol is going to plan and appropriate mitigations will be put in place should there be any issues arising. But this year, for example, the accounts have been they're fully code compliant. They've got IFRS 16 in there, which they didn't last year until sort of really, really late in the process. So good question, but I just want to assure you, we don't want to charge additional fees unless there are any issues.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask very specifically, can I get assurance that the delay of the delivery of accounts from the 22nd of June to the 30th of June will not in and of itself result in the application of a penalty fee to this council?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
I think we had a question from Joe.
Thank you, Chair. This is much more prosaic, I'm afraid. Page 40 of the report, I find that a very helpful table there where you're highlighting for us the the changes in legislation, etc. 3 questions. Well, one small observation first. On one of those, which one is it? I think it's about the renters' rights. There's a small spelling mistake there. You've got new duties for local authorities, enforcement action for, I think you mean to say breaches, yeah, instead of beaches. And then, I'm not quite sure, tenancy by private landlords. Is it breaches, maybe, for breaches of, maybe, I don't know what you meant to say there, but I don't think it's quite right. It just needs correction. Are you with me on where I'm talking? Okay. But 2 questions on this area. I just wanted to check what are the, I mean, some of these seem to be highlighted in a darker shade of, in blue or grey. Has that got, I mean, I just want to know, has that got any significance or is it just one of those things? That's the first question. Again, hopefully a simple one. My second observation, more than a question really, is to say that your expansion then on these, areas that are emerging is also very helpful. And I would just ask perhaps the chair to consider us using some of your guidance there really. For example, the Education for All bill, those questions on SEND, perhaps that you're suggesting we could ask. I find that very helpful, and whilst the committee may already have talked about SEND, I certainly haven't been involved in any discussions about it. So I do think those questions are very helpful and will guide us well as we go into the future. So thank you for that. But maybe you could answer those first 2, or the second question, please. The highlighting?
Apologies, Joe. Would you be able to just...
Yes.
Where's the highlighting?
You know, there's sort of like different colours in that table on page 40. So why are some...
Sorry, is that the kind of white grey?
White grey, yes. White grey, white grey.
Apologies, that's just formatting of the table that's been used. There's no differentiation between those. I think it's just the table formatting that's been used.
Right.
Apologies for the confusion.
No, it's okay. Thank you for that. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Pete, I think you had a question.
Sorry. It's on the, where are we, fit for purpose. A colleague of mine who's involved in a similar position elsewhere as an independent member has experienced some problems with their sports and amenities with an organisation that you refer to as well that has recently collapsed called Fusion Lifestyle, and I'm just wondering whether or not the council are aware of that, but also have they taken into account and looked at their sports outsourced facilities to make sure that they are not vulnerable?
So I don't think that's really a question for Grant Thornton, but is that something that you'd like some response about?
Priority on going forward, yes.
So I think that's something we should note, and we will respond at the following meeting. Do any other of my colleagues have a question? Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you to Grant Thornton for the report. I don't think we are doing anything other than noting and thanking you for your report, but we look forward to the full report next time. Thank you very much. So we now move to internal audit reports. So as you know, where internal audit comes to a decision of limited or no assurance, that report comes here, and we hear from both the relevant auditor and the management response. So the first one of those is on the corporate estates planned maintenance. I believe the internal audit representative is from KPMG. And then I think David is here to give the management response. So to KPMG first.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm Tiffany Irwin, Internal Audit Manager at KPMG. So this was a repeat audit following a previous limited assurance opinion that was issued in May last year, and considered the arrangements for managing the planned preventative maintenance, or PPM programme, across the Council's corporate estate, and also included looking at the quality of information held within the JobLogic system. So positively, we found strong evidence of challenge within contract management meetings, as well as the maintenance of an action log and risk register. However, we have given a limited assurance rating due to the issues identified regarding the information within the JobLogic system, which limits the effectiveness of the Council's oversight of the PPM programme. So some of the key findings raised included issues with the completeness of jobs and the accuracy of records in the system, the quality of reports available, and the sufficiency of oversight of the quality and cost of the work completed by the contractor. So actions were agreed for each of the findings raised, which are summarised in the summary report that you have, along with an update from management on the progress made to date. It's also worth highlighting that from September, the Concerto asset management system will be used to monitor the PPM programme, so a lot of the actions relate to ensuring that there's a successful rollout of Concerto. But that's all I would say for now, and I'll hand over to David.
Could I ask David, do you have any introductory comments before we take questions from members?
I mean, introductory comments would be probably linked to what Tiffany's just said there. Concerto is a new system that we're implementing, which will be live from September the 1st. So one of the key things that will do is allow us complete control over data and information. Previously, our supplier used its own CAFM system, which is computer-aided facilities management system. So our new system, it's ours, right? So our supplier will have to use that, so we'll have complete transparency of data. So a lot of these findings will be solved through that. The programme split into two phases. The first one focusing on the planned preventative maintenance activity and reactive maintenance, and that will be live from the 1st of September. So we've got 5 weeks of intense work now to get it up and running.
Okay, thank you. So do we have questions on this? You first.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've got a couple. Previous to the May 2025 audit, I was wondering, is JobLogic that was being used for this planned kind of maintenance scheduling, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. It's our supplier's system, and they were utilising their own CAFM system to run the jobs through. So we couldn't have sight of that other than the contract reporting that they gave us.
Okay, so that explains why after that audit, JobLogic access was then provided to the corporate landlord team, because that was something I found quite strange. If this was how we were planning our maintenance, but the people who were meant to be monitoring the maintenance didn't have access to the scheduling, basically. And then following that second audit, the Concerto system, has that been brought in as a result, or was that a separate procurement exercise as a separate body of work, or is that a direct result of this audit limited assurance kind of outcome?
It was a planned piece of activity as part of the property transformation programme. So the Concerto system was going to solve this issue. So it's one of the components of it. But it's also going to give us a wider understanding of our estate's data to inform management decisions around our estate. So it's going to be not just for maintenance, but our complete estate management, including leases, commercial estate, and valuations, and a host of other things as well.
Okay. And that, but just the corporate estate, not any of the housing estate, is that correct?
The housing buildings will be within it because we value them.
Okay.
We speak in valuations. So all of the data will be within it, but we'll be using it for managing and maintaining the corporate assets. We have 1,600 operational assets, which we either do direct service from or other people deliver on our behalf, like third parties. And we also have our commercial estate, which is circa 800 assets as well.
Okay, cool. And then I've got a couple more questions, if I may, as well. So I believe it says the payment applications, audit finding number 3. So the payment applications were submitted for some jobs that were not included in the PPM planners. This created uncertainty over whether claim work was planned and properly completed. So in terms of those applications, what was the value of that work roughly that was misreported?
The value of the work for PPM, roughly, and this was a little while ago, but it's around about 800k per annum for the PPMs in total. So that would be for electrical and mechanical applications.
Okay. So they, and so that discrepancy, then I assume that had to be resolved kind of in person, hashed out, rather than being kind of semi-automated. So is that correct?
It's resolved at year end, so anything which is validated as not being delivered was returned in terms of the money at the end of the year. So there's a reconciliation at the end of each contract year.
Okay, cool. And then my last one as well is this new Concerto system. Are Law and Stewart on board with this, or is this something that we're bringing in and they're resistant to because it's a new system for them? And will it have any implications on, I assume it's a framework with them to deliver any of these schemes, or will it be a variation to that framework at all?
It's within the contractual arrangements that they'll be utilising our system. At the point of the contract with them, this contract that we have now, we didn't have this system in, so the contract alluded to us putting a system in. They use it in, they deliver services in Cornwall, I believe, and they use Concerto there as well.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. Cheers.
Okay, thank you, James. Next question, I think, was from Jonathan.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've got a couple of questions, please. Is it possible to quantify the approximate cost of backlog maintenance across the corporate estate?
At this point in time, I can't validate a total capital figure for maintenance backlog, but I will be able to when all the asset information is loaded into Concerto. So then I'll be able, that's what Concerto can do for us, and it'll help set our capital programme for asset replacement, because the life of our fixed assets will be within the system. So I'll be able to look like 4 years, I should be able to say, in 4 years' time from now, City Hall will need this amount of capital investment based on the age of the assets. To this date, we haven't had a system that can do this for us. So we can estimate the capital backlog based on condition survey information, but we'll get more detailed information from Concerto.
Thank you. I've also got a question on audit finding 3, which Councillor Crawford has already mentioned. It's about the payment applications were submitted for some jobs that were not included in PPM planners. Does this mean that payment could be made for work that had not been done?
As mentioned in my response there's a reconciliation at year end to alleviate that. So it could be that there's a small amount of activity that's paid, but then it's reclaimed at the end of year when the interrogation's done.
Okay, so it could be made, but would then be clawed back?
In the previous iteration of how we delivered this, yes, but moving forward, all the applications will come through Concerto, so they have to be validated before it happens.
To Ed.
Thank you. Just one minor question. For Concerto, can I just check that access of this is maintained by using the Corporate Active Directory?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the end of your question.
So is access to Concerto maintained by using the Corporate Action Directory? Or Corporate Active Directory, sorry.
The Corporate Active Directory, did you say? Yeah, I'm not aware what that is.
Okay, that answers the question. Thank you.
So I think Joe was next.
Thank you, Chair. Oh, we've two Joes, have we? Oh, sorry.
Sorry. Joe
Did you mean
and
me?
then Shona.
Thank you. Three questions from me, please. One, please, for the internal audit first. Struggling a little bit here to just get the context of the report. I mean, I'm taking it this is a follow-up report. You call it a repeat report. It's not entirely clear, and perhaps I haven't read everything properly, just what the result was from the previous internal audit report in terms of the recommendations agreed. Where did we get to with those as a starting point for this report, please? Can you clarify that?
I might need to hand over to the in-house team, but I think, yeah, my understanding is the procedure is where there's a limited assurance, we then do a re-audit 12 months later. So KPMG didn't do the review last year, so I don't know the detail of that report and where the actions got to. So I might need to hand over to the in-house team for that one.
I mean, on the principle, Joe, yes, that is what happens. When there is a limited assurance report, there is a subsequent report in the following municipal year. I don't know if there's anything, Simba, else you'd want to say in relation to that.
No. Okay. Yes, I understand that. What I'm asking about is, you know, how far then were the previous recommendations in the previous report implemented? That's what I'm asking about. It's just that I've seen this in other follow-up reports. You know, we're told X high recommendations were implemented, so many medium implementations. So I was just trying to get the picture on that as the starting point for this particular follow-up review. But if it's not available, that's fine. I can move on to my second question, if I may, Chair. Which is, can you just repeat, and I'm not sure if this was the same question that was asked, can you just repeat the value of the Lawrence Stewart contract, please, the annual value of it to the council?
It's a different question
okay.
to before. So the question before was about the value that the payment application submitted
yes.
for PPM were previously relating to, and that was 800k. So are you asking a different question now, which is what is the value of the new contractual arrangements with Launch? If so, I'd be a bit reticent to kind of say what the total PRF value was.
So maybe we should follow that up, and we can decide how to respond to that. Would that be safer?
That's fine, just for the reason being that we're currently in negotiations with them under pricing for year 2, so I'd be a bit reticent to give specific information in the public forum.
We'll pick that up after the meeting, Joe, and we'll agree what can be shared.
Two more questions, please, Chair, if I may.
Okay.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the Concerto system and how confident are you that everything's going to be okay from September? Because that's the message you're giving here. Have there been any trial runs? Has there been any pilot of the system? How is it going to be so much better than the previous one? Can you give us a bit of assurance regarding that, please?
I'll do my best to give you some assurance. So previously, we don't have an overriding system. Like we indicated, the system was with our third-party supplier. We didn't own our own system. So what we've tried to do with Concerto is consolidate several systems into one that can give us that holistic overview and control over the estate. Concerto delivers to 93 other local authorities. So part of the bid and the tender process was finding someone that was proven of delivering a system that could do all these things for us. We've got a really strong project team in place. We've been doing user testing at the minute. There's a lot of work to do still, which is why we've had to split it into 2 phases and focus phase 1 on the compliance data and the hard FM information and the maintenance regimes. The estates data will come later. So we've tried to mitigate delivery risk by ensuring that we can get the system in place for September so that Lawn Stewart will have to use it from them for the start of year 2 of their contract. So I feel reasonably confident. We've got a good project team with resources in that have stood Concerto up in other authorities before. So I feel reasonably confident.
Okay, thank you for that. And then the final, a bit more simple thing really. Items 4 and 5 on the table on page 53 have got a target date of July 26, which is now. So are you able to comment on the progress with those 2 items, please? Have they been completed?
Yeah, so item 4 is about the quality of reporting provided through JobLogic dashboards and monthly KPI reports. So the KPI reports now deliver strategic and operational KPIs, and our new contractual arrangements with Lawn Stewart have the operational KPIs built into them. So there's a percentage of the application of payment at risk for failure to deliver. So I can confirm that item 4 has been delivered. However, it will improve in the future as well because we'll have further granularity of reporting that will be provided by Concerto. Item 5 is about the sufficient oversight of quality and cost of works completed by the contractor. So what we have is surveyors that have allocated sites. So they've been communicated with and they attend sites on their respective capital projects. So they have to validate that the works have been completed subject to the specifications they provided before payment can be made. That will be an ongoing piece of work that we need to stay on with the surveyors and ensure that they do that. We have a certain amount of resource in that space. We could do with more, but we just need to stay on the ball with that one. But I'm happy with where we're at with it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. So, Shona, it is your turn now.
Sorry, Joe and Shona sound too similar sometimes. My questions were about Appendix 2 on pages 55 and 56 of the bundle. So a couple things, so in terms of the agreed actions, there's a couple of them where, so say actions 1 and 2 to start with. So table 1, the agreed action is to continue to monitor volumes. I suppose I'm always concerned about having an action where it's just we're going to monitor something because it's a very ongoing action. It's not very smart. It's hard to.
Sorry, Shona,
are we not on this item
you're
already?
talking about the item on disclosure compliance.
Okay, I'm so
sorry. We
haven't
actually got to that one yet.
Okay, that's all right. I've just been too
you will be first in the line when we get there.
My apologies.
Do we have any more questions on the corporate estate plan maintenance elements? Tom.
It's just a brief one. Again, it's on number 4 with the KPIs that are being reviewed by BCC and Lawn Stewart to ensure acceptable and we're able to monitor. Could I ask for a little bit clarity around what that means? Because I think there might be some errors in the grammar and syntax there. But basically, how much have the KPIs been reviewed? What are they, if we're aware of that? And what changes and improvements have been made with regards to KPIs?
So the central contract team who supports this contract have delivered us obviously the suite of strategic KPIs that the contract is beholden to as much all the other strategic contracts are. And as I mentioned before, the operational KPIs are built into the contract now so that there's things around response time, quality of work and various things like that. So there's a percentage of the application of payment at risk for failure to deliver. So they're in the contractual arrangements. So we've obviously reviewed that and ensured that they're embedded within that. So there's complete clarity on what they need to deliver and how they need to deliver it.
Thank you. I would also just briefly, Chair, that much like Shona, I'm very keen to speak on the next item. So I'm going to get myself in there first.
So people are getting in the queue for that already. Any more comments on this item? Thank you very much. No. So, sorry. Peter, did you have a question?
Point of clarity, if I may. Within the report, limited assurance is mentioned several times. and being relatively new, I'm not entirely certain what the outcome is of limited assurance.
For Simba.
Thank you, Chair. I tried to make an improvement. So in the covering report, I actually put a table that explains the definitions of those 4 levels of assurance. So within the covering report, I can, let me check what page it is. I think, yeah, page 49. Yeah, under page 49, I tried to explain what those are. But if it is helpful, Peter, I can have another conversation with you outside the meeting just to explain how this works. Thank you.
Of 2 reports with a similar cast. So we are hearing from Phil from Internal Audit and Ben from there's the management response. So this is for clarity. This is the second item. So disclosure, compliance, and data breaches. So over to you, Phil.
Thank you, Chair. Phil Eames, Internal Audit Manager, who oversaw this piece of work. This was, again, a follow-up review in response to a previous limited assurance report and considered action that was ongoing in terms of the ICO's comments and steers in regard of FOIs and subject access requests. We also had a look at action that's being taken in response to data breaches. As I said, this report also provided limited assurance. This was the second time. We noted the positive progress that had been made in reducing original backlogs and implementing action plans that have been prepared to address the ICO's concerns. However, at the time of the audit, there was still a continuing backlog and an ongoing inability to meet the statutory response deadlines. Progress against that continued to be constrained by ongoing rising volumes of FOI and SAR requests, which made life much more difficult. It's worth emphasising that the disclosure team is not there to answer the FOIs and SARs themselves directly, that they are very much reliant on information provided by the directorates themselves, and if that information isn't forthcoming, that's often where delays occur, and that was very much emphasised in the Council's response and internal action plans. As we always do, we produced our audit findings and invited management to provide management actions in response to those. Those are provided at the end of this audit summary, and Ben has produced an update of action against those. So I'll hand over to Ben to give you a further update.
So Ben, do you want to introduce yourself and then make some introductory comment?
Perfect. Thanks, Chair. So Ben Hukin, I'm the Head of Information Governance at the Council. So first things to say just in regards to the previous audit, so the last audit, limited assurance, all of those, or 3 high and 4 medium risks from the previous internal audit report have all been implemented and closed. And then on another positive note, in regards to the timeliness of both FOI and subject access requests, they have since improved since this report was written. From an FOI perspective, over the last 2 quarters, we've actually been over 90% in both of those last 2 quarters. And last quarter, subject access requests were at 73%. So still not quite where we need to be, but it's still an improvement on kind of when this report has been written. I can take questions on the actual kind of action plans or the actions separately in a second. But just to say, 2 of them relate to a service review of the disclosures team, so that is currently underway. What we're looking at specifically is around kind of the current capacity within the team, doing that by working similar to other external agencies that we've engaged with in the past, by page count rather than just individual requests that come in, because as I'm sure you're aware, That could vary from a couple of hundred pages to a few thousand pages. So what we're now looking is tracking page count for subject access requests, and then working out what volume we can deliver within the team, and therefore we can more accurately forecast going forward. And then one thing we're looking to do is take a number of proposals to the Corporate Leadership Board to say, this is what we currently offer with the capacity that we've got. If we want to do more, then this is what it would look like from a resourcing perspective. And these are a number of other options, which could include using external services to provide that, or increasing the resource within the team. So that's kind of what that kind of service review piece will look like, whether that's, like I say, carry on as we are, or do more in-house or do more externally. So hopefully that answers some of the questions.
Thank you very much. So we move to questions from members, and Shona is first on this list.
Yes, thank you. Appreciate it. My question was, so I had a couple. So one of them was about the, as I was saying on page, I think 55, about the targets and the actions. So I suppose for action 2, you've just talked about the service review. So it's planned for early 26-27, but the target date is December 26. So I just wanted to clarify when we're actually thinking it's going to be finished.
So we're looking to take the proposals of the service redesign, as it says there, towards the kind of late summer. So we're in the early stages of that now. But the actual implementation of it will take a little bit longer. And obviously standing up, depending on what the decision will be from corporate leadership, whether that's a outsourced or internal resource, those resources would then have to be kind of stood up. So that's the difference in the timelines there.
Okay, thank you. And then for, I suppose, actions 1 and actions 4, I guess I'm concerned that it's about monitoring, which doesn't feel like a very specific objective, a very measurable objective. So I just wondered if there's any way we can tighten those up to make them more clear about like what our actual target is, so we'll know if we've achieved it.
That's fine. So we'll take those two separately, because action 1 is around kind of volumes of requests. So that kind of alludes back to the bit I was talking around the forecasting based on page count. So we're looking at that to kind of get a more accurate kind of idea of the kind of volumes coming in there. And then item 4 talks about data breaches, and the reason I've put the response there around kind of continue to monitor that is because it's the kind of the what the ISO term low risk data breaches that are increasing. The ones that are the high risk ones that report all to the ICO, those ones are actually coming down. So that's what I mean by monitoring those. Is obviously, yes, data breaches are increasing, but I would rather those are reported to us as a central team to log and monitor and deal with appropriately, rather than try and kind of put any remedial action in place that might prevent staff from feeling that they can report data breaches. So it's a very kind of delicate balance there in terms of actions we can take to reduce data breaches.
Yeah, obviously you want staff to be able to feel that they can be honest when they've made a mistake. I do notice, obviously you've talked in the first column about compliance for the data protection training is significantly low but the required one. What can we do to get that number up? Because that is something that we could measure.
So that's something we're looking at both within my service in terms of kind of sending directors kind of a breakdown of compliance within their service area, but it is also kind of a wider challenge across the council in terms of kind of mandatory training. It's not just something we're seeing in isolation. So we're working with the learning and development team around kind of how we can leverage what they're doing around kind of other elements of mandatory training that we can kind of jump onto.
You know, maybe need like a council-wide campaign to make everyone do it.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
I think Tom was also on the prior notification.
The joys of being the early bird, I think. So I do want to preface what I'm about to say by saying that I think there's obviously been some very clear major improvement here. I mean, it's very good to note on the SAR, for example, that the backlog had reduced to 14 compared to 231 in June. I mean, that's really good, and that deserves some credit. But, and this is where the fun begins, I think there is still some concerns around this. So noting with the increase or the problems that we're having with FOIs, and I note that we're having an increasing number of them. is it just the number? Are we also receiving more complex FOIs? Because obviously it's becoming more, there's more knowledge about how they're submitted and how they're used. So are we seeing more complex FOIs as well?
I think it's fair to say we are. And I think what you'll find is a lot of that is kind of the ability for members of the public to utilise AI, for example, to understand the legislation, and able then to submit more complex FOIs. So yeah, we are definitely seeing more complex or as well as kind of higher volumes.
So obviously it's not always easy to tell when something is AI, but we're seeing more AI generated ones, just to clarify on that as well.
That's an assumption, but I think yes, from what we're seeing and the format they're coming through in, yes. Because
part of the, and I appreciate we've got the service review, and that might be an argument, as you noted, for internal resourcing. But part of my concern is that if we are getting more FOIs, more complex FOIs, more potentially complex SARs as well, and I note the sustained level of breaches for that increasing the likelihood of further regulatory scrutiny and intervention. We've just, as we've discussed earlier, had the ICO judgment on regards to stepping up, which resulted in a kind of, let's say, criticism of how we were performing things. And my concern is that if we don't get a strong handle on it, and if we don't have a strong commitment to transparency, we are, as noted, in a lot more danger of judgments, which is going to result in yet more work and going to result in potentially a narrower scope. So trying to work through the phrasing of the question, I apologise. With the note around the more complex FOIs and SARs in place, how are we going to address this in a timely and transparent manner so that we are not at that kind of level of risk? Because I think from what you've said, and I'd certainly be worried about this, I'd certainly want to see it on the corporate risk register, we are in danger, and that's not somewhere I'm comfortable with us being. So your thoughts would be very welcome.
Good question. So I think there's a couple of parts to unpick there. So the first bit was around kind of the individual decision notice on that particular case. So we do see those from the ICO, and that's specific to the way we've answered individual cases. So that's kind of one element to it. And that's kind of where it comes back to the public forum question around kind of taking that learning and trying to better support staff going forward in the application of those exemptions. The second piece is around that wider, I suppose, corporate lens that the ICO has on us in terms of how are we doing as an authority, and that's where the not decision notices, the enforcement notices have been used in the past. So I'm in regular contact with the lead over at the ICO for the public sector element, both on the FOI front and on the SAR front. So I'm managing that relationship to ensure that we are staying kind of on their good list, for want of a better word. And that would also include making sure we escalate internally where we're seeing service areas kind of not performing where they need to. So there's a quarterly report as well as the kind of the corporate KPIs that go to all of the executive EDMs, which shows how their services are performing from an FOI perspective. So that then should be able to then allow them to appropriately resource their teams to respond to FOIs.
One last follow-up on that?
One last question.
Yeah. So with regards to that, are there any particular areas where we are seeing a particular concern around OFI responses? Because I am conscious of the public forum question and that there may be, let's say, areas where members of the public have particular concerns and particular worries about information. They try and draw it out, they keep sending these requests, and they end up in a position where they do not get an answer, we end up with the ICO again. We don't want to be in that position again, so are there any problem areas of which we're aware?
I think it would be unfair of me to say off the top of my head, so what I'll do is I'll take that away and I'll share some stats with you around kind of where the service areas are performing or not. I think that's probably the fairest.
That would be very welcome.
Okay, thank you, Ben. I'm sure everyone will be of interest in that as evidence. I think Ellie was next.
Thank you. I think Tom's stolen most of what I was going to ask about, but I guess I wanted to ask a bit about, you know, this. We're seeing the symptoms. We're seeing the kind of, like you say, there's more interest in this. People have got a better understanding of how to do an FOI request. Is there work being done to try and mitigate that? So more proactive. So thinking about sort of building on what you and Tom have just been talking about. Do we think that there is more room to put more out into the public domain? Will that help? Or actually, is it not that? Is there something else that we can sort of proactively do to try and mitigate this? Because it's not going to go away, is it? And it seems crazy that we're going to have to keep kind of running to catch up.
Again, very good question. So one of the things the team are trying to do with the service areas is kind of look at data sets and things that they can publish proactively. The challenge we have at the moment is obviously resource capacity within the team, dealing with kind of internal reviews and things like that. So one of the things we're looking to do is support the service areas more closely in enabling them to say, well, this is something you keep getting asked about, why not publish it regularly? And therefore then people can go and self-serve and find it themselves, or if an FOI does come in, it can just be redirected to that information is already publicly available. So yeah, that is something we do try and do, and we will try and do more of. It's just a capacity bit at the moment.
Okay, I think Ed was next, and then Joe.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to ask a different selection of questions, but firstly, just on that final action now, in action 4, the key mitigation has been identified in the finding, and yet the action and the progress update just say something different. They say we're going to continue to monitor this, when a mitigation has quite clearly been identified, which is to do with the rates to do with training. And so I'm just a bit concerned that the actions don't actually provide any way of encouraging greater compliance with training, which is a key mitigation. So just say that I'd like to see that brought back with some kind of tangible management action to explain how that compliance gap with training is going to be closed, because that's been identified as a likely source. Just firstly, a couple of detailed questions. So on actions 1 and 2, if you can just clarify the acronyms EDM and CLB, because they'll be familiar internally but not to the public. And secondly, if I can just confirm that the data breach procedures next annual review has been scheduled in for within a year of the last one, so by February 2027.
So in answer to your first question, EDM is Executive Director Meetings, so that's chaired by the various Exec Directors, and CLB is the Corporate Leadership Board, which is chaired by Nick. And apologies, I missed your second question.
So just on action 3, it refers to the data breach procedure being last reviewed in 2026. This is mandated as an annual process, which hasn't been kept to before, but obviously please been reviewed in the last year. So can I confirm the next annual review has been scheduled in for February 2027 or earlier?
That is correct, yes. It will be February 2027 or earlier.
Okay, that's great, thank you. And then just a more general set of questions. So we've had a change of monitoring officer recently, and I'm glad that Nancy's with us today. I just want to ask, I'm not sure which of the three of you would be best placed to answer this question, but I just wanted to ask for how long the previous monitoring officers, who I believe vacated the role on Thursday or Friday last week, how long their emails and correspondence will be maintained on records and be available for disclosure requests for, please.
So I can't, I'll need to take that away and have a look, because I believe that there has been a request to hold the account rather than for it to be deleted. But the exact period of time that will be held for, I need to confirm.
Okay, yes, if you could confirm what that period of time is, please. It's obviously quite commonplace that the actions and decisions of former monitoring officers are often in the public interest, and so I think it's helpful for us to be transparent about that time frame. Thank you.
So I think Joe was next, then Nick and Jonathan.
Thank you, Chair. I think maybe Councillor Fraser has asked about this before, but I'm going to repeat some of what's been said, perhaps. Item 4, you know, the internal audit report has rated this as a red item. It's a high priority. But yet, you know, your final column there kind of says that there's nothing currently to be done. Now, currently, what you're going to do, you've put a target date of December 2026. So I'm wondering what you mean by, you know, currently to be done. And, you know, we do seem to be, well, I'm not sure, not quite answering the point, which is the ICO's target is 95%, and we're just currently achieving 74%, which is, as the internal auditor says, a significantly below that target. So I just wanted an explanation, please, as to the rationale for your position in regard to that item.
I think it's a fair question. So I think there's two actions within that number 4 finding. There's one is around the data breaches increasing, which is what I've answered with my management action. I suppose what I haven't actually done is address the compliance with the mandatory training. I think we briefly touched on it earlier, which is around kind of it is a kind of a corporate issue that we're looking to kind of leverage the work being done by the learning and development team to up our mandatory training, as well as driving out our own messaging around sending directors compliance stats around their own service areas compliance on their mandatory training. So I think, yes, I haven't addressed it directly in a management response, so I can speak with Phil about getting that amended.
Thank you. Sorry, Chair, can I just ask then, what about the 95% target?
So that's the mandatory training, yes. So we're looking to get ourselves from 74% up to 95% compliance with the mandatory training. So
how does that translate then into nothing currently required to be done?
So that one relates to the number of data breaches. So what I'm saying is I haven't directly answered that move from 74% to 95% in the management actions. So I'll work with Phil to get the report amended to include an extra point on the mandatory training.
Okay, I just think, Chair, that part of the report could be a lot clearer in terms of what's being highlighted.
Yeah, I think we would all welcome some clarification of the programme for that. If I might ask a supplementary to Joe's question. Mandatory training sounds like you have to do it rather than you should do it. And in other organisations, in general, the thing that makes people do mandatory training is if there's a penalty for not doing it. In other words, if someone says you can't access your laptop unless you've completed that training by a certain time, people realise they have to do that by that certain time. So I think, and appreciate this is probably an L&D question rather than a information asset management question. But I wonder if we might actually take that back to HR and ask for an update on how that is being encouraged is too weak a word. What the plan is to ensure that people complete their mandatory, not discretionary training. Sorry, next question from Ed.
Yeah, just to respond to that directly, I'd be careful about us prescribing the method through which we motivate people to undertake mandatory training. I used to work in this space, and one of the concerns that come from that is you might get a high completion rate, but not necessarily effective learning from that, because people will click through the steps quickly to get back on their laptop in that scenario. So just ensuring that they have agency to work out what the best methods to motivate are, but otherwise I support the suggestion.
And next question from Nick and then Jonathan.
Thank you, Chair. I think that this discussion has demonstrated that information management isn't just for the information governance team, and that disclosures and transparency is an issue for the entire organisation. But as you identified at the beginning of the meeting, our senior leaders are not available today. I would like this committee to invite the Chief Executive to talk to us about his approach to transparency and the leadership that he is setting for the senior officers and the council. And I would like the Chief Executive to come to this committee and talk to us. So would other members wish to endorse that request?
Do people have a general support of that principle? Yeah, I think we will make that request. It may not be in September. We'll have to work out the diary management aspects of that, or the diary management consequences of that, but I think that's a very good idea. I think we had a question from Jonathan.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, some of my questions have already been dealt with, and there is a degree of overlap between my question and one of Councillor Fraser's questions, but my question concerns the period for which emails are retained. I understand that when people leave the organisation, their emails are deleted after 30 days. Is that still the case?
So currently that is the case, but that is under review due to various other reports that have come out. One being the, I can't remember off the top of my head, there's the SEND report that talked about email retention. So it's being reviewed as part of that. So currently it's still the case, but it is under review.
So if emails are deleted, currently deleted 30 days after somebody leaves, doesn't that seriously compromise our ability to respond to information requests?
So I think it goes back to the golden motion response that was taken through last year, where email is not used as a document retention or as a storage medium. There are appropriate storage elements for that, which is SharePoint, OneDrive, and various line of business systems. So that will be taken into account as part of this review around that 30-day period.
So if correspondence has taken place by means of email and the emails get deleted, would all of those emails be able to be retrieved via a storage system, or is there the possibility that emails that have been deleted wouldn't be able to be retrieved?
What I was referring to is it was in the response to the golden motion, it talked about the fact that guidance is out there for staff to move documents to the correct place of storage, not to leave them in email. So things of importance shouldn't be left in email.
Sorry, I don't think you've answered the question. So will emails still be able to be accessed if they've been deleted in every single instance?
No, so once the emails are deleted after the 30 days after somebody's left, there's no guarantee that they're retrievable.
So that surely compromises our ability to respond to freedom of information and subject access requests.
If we hold the information, then we'll look to disclose it. But we would. So I'm struggling to see the challenge to the question here.
Yeah, I think you're right, Ellie. I think the answer is yes, basically. I just got another question on that. Yeah, if people are still in post, I think that their emails are, as I understand it, currently retained from day one. There was a suggestion that emails to and from members would be deleted after 4 years and officers after 2 years. Is that being taken forward? Is that being implemented, or
so
is
that's currently on hold pending further discussions at Corporate Leadership Board?
Okay, thank you. But I would like to make the point that deleting out emails after 30 days, I think, is completely unsatisfactory, and I would certainly hope that whilst this review is taking place, the monitoring officers' emails would not be deleted.
That's already been clarified. They are on hold. They are being held, so they won't be deleted.
Nancy, did you want to make a comment?
To your point, Councillor, I think the other issue that we need to be very conscious of is not only our ability to disclose on FOI and subject access, but also to inquiries and to court proceedings. So we may have requests to, for example, there's now a national inquiry into grooming gangs going on, so we need to be able to respond fully to those. So we do need to be very aware of our ability to provide all the information we hold. So that is something that is being actively considered. Also, I would say that it is possible to ask for an extension to officers' emails being retained, and I have in fact done that for various key officers that have left the organisation, where I've considered that retention of their emails is necessary for a longer period of time. So it is possible, but by exception.
Thank you.
So I'm conscious to get to the end of this item, partly because I was hoping to have a comfort break at that point. But we have a request from Tom and Joe for, I hope, a brief final question.
It is brief. It's simply with relation, we agreed to invite the Chief Executive, but considering the amount of questions that we have around SharePoint and how that system is being used, I'm not certain whose responsibility that sits under, but it might be worth getting a bit of a report on SharePoint and how it's being used, or inviting the officer who is in charge of SharePoint to discuss that at the same time.
So I think it is the communications and digital would be the area that relates to that, which I think is in the Chief Executive's responsibility. But we will clarify that in that.
Well, if
in
we
that
could have the officer in question there at the same time, I think that would just be very helpful.
Yeah. Joe.
Thank you, Chair. And briefly, isn't part of the answer to this to ensure that there are particular formats for SARs and FOIs to be raised so that it isn't reliant on the emails of individual officers, or at least it isn't reliant on emails potentially being lost, driving the process? So shouldn't the process be, you know, I'm thinking about things like have a proper official form, I'm sure these exist, for the member of the public who's raising the SAR or the FOI to complete. And that is the document that's retained and must be retained. And that is the one that's critical, is it not? Rather than emails. We shouldn't really be relying on emails, should we?
I think Ed wanted to comment on that response particularly.
I think the question slightly misunderstands the issue that's being raised here. The issue is not necessarily the email with the subject access request itself being lost. The concern is that because the emails of the person whose actions are subject to the subject access request haven't been deleted by the council, that vital information requested in that subject access request is no longer available. So I think it's to do with the email being requested rather than the email being sent with the request.
Last comment, Ellie.
Sorry, just very quickly. So an illustration of that issue, which I think you've alluded to, is an issue that we've looked at in Children and Young People's Committee around some parents concerned about what was happening in terms of their social media and whether it was being used by officers to monitor them. It's probably the simplest way of putting it. And one of the things that the investigation came up against was emails that had been deleted because it was a historical thing. So, so that retention thing is really important for those situations. It's meant that there are officers who've left who we haven't been able to necessarily interview, and we haven't been able to pull on their emails to understand what was happening. And while emails shouldn't be used for decision making, and I think we've clarified that shouldn't happen and that shouldn't be a record, and there are other ways of doing that. I think for that sort of situation where the correspondence, the discussion that was happening was important, that's where email retention becomes significant.
And Barton House is another example, I would just say, where this is essential.
Okay, thank you very much. So we note this report. I appreciate we're at between Appendix 2 and Appendix 3 of the same report, but I still think it might be a good time for a short break. If people could be back by 5 past, that would be appreciated. So there we are. There we go. So thank you for that break. We continue with the audit report. So the next one is information asset governance. So this again is introduced by Phil and Ben. Phil.
Thank you, Chair. This is again a follow-up review to an earlier review where we provided limited assurance. The Council obviously holds vast amounts of information, including an awful lot of personal and highly sensitive information. In terms of governance, then the responsibility for managing and safeguarding that information sits with the directorates who both collect and use that information. So the information asset owners are the senior directors within the Council. The information governance team supports that through setting the context and providing support policies and so on to assist those information asset owners. So, as I said, we provided limited assurance for a second time on the effectiveness of the governance structure. As always, we have provided our findings, received management actions in response to those findings. An update against those management actions has been provided, again, by Ben, so I'll hand over to him.
Thanks, Phil. So similarly to last time, I think the first comment to say on this one is that all previous management actions from the last two reports on information asset ownership have been implemented. So I think that was just the first point to raise. And I think secondly, the comment in kind of 3.2 under audit opinion around the fact that we set, as information governance, set the framework, the standards. But I think there's now a kind of a conversation to be had directly with the corporate leadership team about how we kind of support, or what more we can do from my side to support that, and what I require from them in terms of driving this kind of ownership type piece further forward. And then just in terms of the specific actions themselves, so there's a couple of updates on that. Specifically in regards to item 2, so that you'll notice that the date is June. So that document has been reviewed. The next Information Governance Board is September, so that reviewed document will go to that September board before it is published. And then the next one to add a comment on is just around the training. So just to say that training has now been updated. It is kind of ready to be rolled out on the Learning and Development portal for all directors, aiming for early September on that, and that does have a re-enrolment piece built into it, which I know obviously was one of the other actions there. So happy to take questions.
Okay, so comments on this. I think Tom was first.
So thanks for this. There's just a couple of points that are kind of a little bit confusing or concerning. So to note, for example, the information governance framework had not been updated since 2019, but there was a follow-up report in August 24 and an internal audit report from February 2022, and it's taken until now to update this. Am I correct in thinking that? Why was that not done sooner, for example?
So I can't comment as to whether they were in the other internal audit reports or not. I can't remember what the actions were specifically for that. But yeah, I can say it would have been reviewed, but it hasn't been updated. I think republished with the correct date. So
right, and I'm wondering if someone can maybe answer then how many of these findings have been in a similar format at the previous reports on this. So we had 22, 24, and now 26. How many of the audit findings, we've got 7, were broadly similar to those raised then? Do we know that?
I wonder if that's possibly a question for Phil.
Yes, I think we do say that the management actions previously agreed have been implemented. Unfortunately, the management actions haven't necessarily secured the required actions from mainly the information asset owners themselves in terms of being more active in sort of seeking out and embracing the training, for example. So there are not really anything new in this report. It is covering the more or less the same areas as in the previous two.
Right, that's not reassuring to hear, but thank you very much for clarifying on that. I think none of us particularly want to be back here in 28 and hearing that, well, others akin to the free reports, well, they haven't really changed much. So I think this is something that as a committee we probably want to be very conscious of. This is an area where we absolutely do need to see improvement. And noting that point, that primarily seems to be from the IAOs themselves. I will just, others may want to dive into other parts of this, but noting that the information asset register and that, you know, there will be documentation on the ILCs and so on, we seem to have a very good sort of, oh, we're going to put in these processes, but then it doesn't really improve. What steps can we reasonably take to, I'm conscious of the point that Councillor Fraser raised earlier about, you know, how we ensure things and enforce things, can we lead people to it? But how do we motivate people to comply with what we're putting in front of them?
I'm not sure that that's directly one for me to answer, but in the specific information asset owner bit, I think that it's going to be a case of working with the corporate leadership board in terms of getting those directors below them on board with their roles as information asset owners. Exactly what that looks like, I'm kind of yet to work that through with the corporate leadership team.
I think this is an area where we would be ripe for trouble as well, and I don't think as a council we want to be in there, and it shouldn't be that difficult, and especially if it has been raised now 3 times, I'm struggling to see how people aren't getting the message, but I'll leave it at that.
So I think the next question is from Ed and then Joe.
I think we might be able to get to the heart of that quite quickly, because there's a few things tying together today. If we just look at items 5, 6, 7 here, they refer to the information asset owners having generally not completed training consistently. And I would assume, and firstly just to clarify, I assume the information asset owners in each directorate, they're fairly senior officers, right? I mean, are they the directors themselves, or?
They are the directors themselves.
They're the directors themselves. Well, there we go. They're the directors themselves. We've seen in the previous appendice that there's a pretty low compliance rate with lots of these training interventions, and actually the compliance rate amongst the 9 directors is even lower than it is amongst general staff. I think I made that to be 55, so like 55, 56%. So this is clearly a motivation issue from the top, I would have thought. So how are those information asset owners being encouraged and mandated to complete this training, other than the 11 of us getting frustrated once every 2 years?
So I think that's worse than the mandatory training overall performance, because information asset owners are generally quite senior people. So I think it would be, in a way that this wouldn't be possible for training across the organisation, I think it would be completely possible for us to ask which information asset owners have not completed their training. There's a debate about whether that needs to go in the public domain, but there's no reason why that can't be shared with members of the committee. Sorry, I was going to say, should we get that for next time? But you do have a comment on that now, Ben.
So yeah, just a comment on, so that 5 of 9 piece is not around the completion of mandatory training. It's around kind of understanding their roles and responsibilities. So at the time, the directors had completed their training. What this is saying is that they've not understood from that training what the requirements of that role is kind of put upon them. So it still has the same impact, I agree. But yes, so hence why we've updated the training to ensure it more specifically covers what it is that they're needed to do.
Okay, thank you. And it's helpful to clarify that, because we want to point to the reasons other than they didn't do it because they didn't have time or they weren't motivated to. If it's due to the quality of the training, that's fair, and I'm glad that's why that intervention is being made about the training itself. But at the same time, I look at point 7, they still haven't, they were not completing mandatory information security training. So the impact is the same. But I'd also say the general point applies that if the most senior directors in this organisation are not motivated to complete some parts of this training, I get there are lots of other things to do, and training interventions might not feel like the most important thing at the best of times. But given some of the two other appendices we discussed today, they really do emphasise the importance of it.
So I think it will be completely appropriate for us to ask by our September meeting, are there any IEO training courses that are outstanding? I think that would be completely reasonable for us to ask. So, I mean, I appreciate that's not in your control, but I think that information should be available to members of the committee. Sorry, Joe, and then Shona.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I mean, maybe given that this is indeed the third report and we're dealing with the same issues, the third report from internal audit, is there a question around how explicit are the management actions that are agreed to? Should there be more definition around who is responsible and who must collaborate and who must achieve these actions? Perhaps there's room for that. I'm wondering if internal audit might agree with that. I would hope you would. But I mean, maybe the senior officers they're not clear about their responsibility for this. You talk about motivation. I mean, the best motivation is that they will have seen clearly in the management actions on internal audit reports what they're responsible for and what they have to do. So maybe that's a way forward. I wanted to ask another question, though, about the asset registers, and that we seem to be saying here that the asset registers are not satisfactory. And I just wondered about external audit and the accounts and the completion of the accounts. And unfortunately, they're not here. But I'm wondering, I think the question needs to be asked, do they have something to say about this? Because we are talking about asset registers here, which is a key important part of evidence for the external auditor to see in the audit of the accounts. So I'd like to ask about that and, the overall value of these assets we're talking about. We're talking here about essentially intangible assets, I presume, though I could be wrong. What is the seriousness of the fact that the registers are not effective, are not properly in place? Because that would be an issue for the audit of the accounts, I would have thought. So I'm not sure how you want to deal with that question.
I'm not sure it would, Joe. We are talking mainly around information assets rather than assets of value. So I'm not sure it would have a material impact to the accounts themselves, but it's certainly something that should be complied with. And I think your first point around do people not understand their obligations regarding information assets is exactly right, because the policy is very clear on who is responsible for them. So it is absolutely an issue of compliance rather than there being a problem with the policy. But if there are people that haven't done that, that needs to be clear, and it's clearly not. Internal auditor and Ben's team have made this comment before, so this is around compliance within the areas. But I think we've addressed that. I think we've probably come to the end of this item. I think we're all of a similar view that this is important, and we want to have more information shared with the committee on compliance with those particular areas. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Phil. And I think I think we're happy to note each of those three reports in that way. I assume. So thank you. So we are moving on to the first of two reports on corporate risk. So this is the corporate risk update, which shows changes in risks since the previous period. This is going to be introduced by Simba rather than Aldo Zanetti. If people can make one comment, it will be obvious that there is one deteriorating risk which relates to construction design management. People should just be aware that our next topic is specifically about that. So we will deal with most of those questions then, if that's possible. Simba, do you want to say anything to introduce this item?
Yes, Chair. I was going to simply say I'll take the report as read, Chair, and I'm doing this because of unseen circumstances which have taken Aldo away. So members, be kind with your questions. So this report presents the corporate risk position as at 5th of June 2026. The ask is that the committee review and comment on the report and consider whether it provides sufficient assurance that the Council's most significant risks are being identified, managed, and monitored. As the Chair said, the corporate risk register has got 14 risks now, 2 critical risks, 5 high risks, and 7 medium-rated threat risks. There are currently no opportunity risks recorded within the register as we speak. The 2 critical risks, which are at 20, both at 28, CRR 60, which is about the Council's ability to meet statutory and regulatory standards across the housing stock, and CRR 58, the Council's ability to maintain and replace highways, traffic, parking, and docks infrastructure. Chair, these are the main areas of greatest corporate exposure, and therefore would require continued close oversight on the effectiveness and then the delivery of the mitigations. There has been some positive movement with the emergency planning risk as well as the Council's insurance arrangements. However, the construction design management risk is deteriorated from 10 to 15. This risk is subject to another deep dive in this meeting, so I won't go into detail on that. In summary, across the Council, there are 237 live risks, scoring with 8 of those risks scoring between 20 and 28. 10 of the risks have remained static for at least 3 reporting periods. What we will do with Aldo and the risk team is we'll support the risk management process by challenging risk owners during Q2 to establish whether controls and mitigation actions are genuinely reducing the exposure. Chair, the report demonstrates that risk management arrangements are in place and that all corporate risk have management actions. However, sustained improvements are required to ensure that actions are reducing exposure in sufficient space. I'll end there, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Simba. Who would like to comment on this? Joe.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Simba, and I appreciate your position in presenting this. One of the questions I have is that the report is a little bit confusing regarding the rules around escalation of risks from directorate registers or service registers even or whatever. But I think I've found my way through it. But it is a little confusing. Talks about at one point that there are no or perhaps no new escalated risks. And then it tells us that there's something like 8 risks sitting on directorate registers that are rated 20 to 28, I think, something like that. And then I looked further and I found that the rule around escalation, which is in here, is for any risks that are over 20 to be escalated to the corporate risk register. So I think that just needs to be looked at in terms of clarifying what the position is regarding escalated risks and the rationale for either escalating them or not escalating them, de-escalating them, as is the term. The second point I'd want to make about the report, just for us, for ease of reading in the future, it could be a little more succinct in terms of the narrative. There's a lot of repetition in the points that are made. I won't bore you with the detail, but an example would be 1.6 and 3.3, for example, repeat exactly the same points regarding, regarding the importance of risks, etc. So could that just be made a little bit easier to read and more succinct? And then the final point is page 64. There's a very useful table, I think, there, setting out the position of the 237 risks that are currently in place across the council. And it shows us their rating. What would be even better, I think, and would enhance the usefulness of that table would be if we could have a sense of how that table pans out across directorates. I think that would be very useful for us as the committee, just to see that picture. Where do those risks sit across directorates? And hopefully that would be possible to provide that for us. Thank you.
Are you able to comment on that, Simba?
Yeah, I think I can only comment. The first comment I'm going to make is I think the point made. I think when I look at the report and the table, yes, but I think what we need to make sure is that we are talking about corporate risks here. So there is that relationship that we need to manage because we put this in the report. So we'll do something about that. But in terms of escalation, there's a requirement that anything between from 20 onwards, but I don't think it's a must. I don't think it's must. I think that's probably what we need to clarify in terms of what the policy says. I don't think it's always that anything that is between 20 and 20 should just go up on the corporate risk. There's a risk here that we end up with fifth risks. So we need to find the right balance that, yes, something can still be, but still manage it at the service level. But until it becomes difficult for them to manage and they need corporate support, then they need to escalate. But we make sure that is clarified in the report, in future reports.
I mean, I think that is ambiguous, Simba. Just our last housing committee, we had obviously the risk that's ranked 28 is on the corporate risk register, but there were two risks that are ranked 21, and one of them is on the corporate risk register, and one is managed departmentally. It's not massively obvious what the criteria are for that. Any other comments? Tom?
Just a very quick one, just on page 64. However, during Q2, we'll be challenging some risk owners to find out how their risks are being mitigated, so on and so forth, could result in the rating changing. When is that work likely to be concluded by, and I assume we'll get a report on that in due course?
I assume we'll get the reports in the next period. So we normally see this quarterly.
Yeah, Q2.
So we'll see it in Q2 of this municipal year. So, no other comments? Can we, Ed?
Yeah, sorry, just a little one. Just some from page 67 to 69. We've got the different. We've got the risk register display in Appendix A. We were discussing beforehand, and we just wanted clarity on why the different assessment dates occur at such inconsistent intervals. So, I appreciate they might be measured in different ways within a directorate, say, because they'll be measured in a particular meeting. But even within the same directorate, there's some inconsistency. So there's cases where they're being measured monthly quite consistently, others that are being measured quarterly quite consistently, some where they're being measured quarterly but a quarter somewhere's been missed. There's one case, I think CRR 37, where it's measured twice in 2 days, but hasn't been measured in 4 months and wasn't measured for 4 months before that. So I'm not asking for a full answer now, but just a bit of explainer as to why the assessment dates vary so much would be helpful. And related to that specifically, CRR 43 on page 69. So this is about the City Regional Sustainable Transport Settlement. Given the liveness of that issue, why hasn't that been measured since November of last year?
You're able to comment on that?
No, I'm not. No.
Okay, so we will respond to that in writing.
I will respond as part of the action. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So we're happy to note that report, and then we'll move on to the specific discussion of CDM. Thank you for your patience. I know that we've had quite a lot of other things to get through. But could I ask you to introduce yourself and then to briefly, we've seen the report, briefly summarise the current position on CDM management.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Christina. Is that better? I'm Christina Tchaikovsky-Crouch. I'm Head of Corporate Health Safety and Wellbeing. So, yes, you've had the... Is that better for you? Thank you. So I'm Christina Tchaikovsky-Crouch. I'm Head of Corporate Health Safety and Wellbeing. I'm responsible for undertaking the risk assessment. So the corporate risk is CRRC1, and that's a failure to manage the requirements under the Construction Design Management Framework, which could result in serious injury, fatality, regulatory action, or project delays and financial or reputational impacts to the council. So why this risk matters is that Bristol City Council delivers a significant programme of construction, maintenance, refurbishment and infrastructure projects that all fall within the CDM regulations. As a client under CDM 2015, we have significant legal duties to ensure that those projects are planned, managed and monitored safely. And we also have duties within the council where we undertake design and contractor duties as well. Failure for us to do this would obviously potentially result in serious injury, HSC enforcement, criminal prosecution, increased project costs and delays, and reputational damage to the council. So how have we got here? Serious construction-related incident back in 2023 highlighted weaknesses in our ability to consistently oversee CDM compliance across council. The risk at that point was added to the corporate risk register. We had an independent review that identified gaps in both our governance, our processes, resources, and our assurance and management information. So we have achieved phase 1 since that time. In terms of our governance, we have now a corporate CDM policy and procedure which has been introduced. We have clearer accountability for project managers and client roles. We have developed a CDM SharePoint hub and governance framework which has been established, and we have now enhanced reporting through our governance, health and safety boards. Our processes, we've standardised our project categorisation, we've developed new templates and guidance, and we've improved that duty holder appointment process. And we have a gateway approval arrangements that have strengthened the RAMS process, which is risk assessment and method statements for some of those lower works. In terms of capability, we have got a resource to appoint to a dedicated CDM compliance manager post. This is currently being undertaken by an interim role as we failed to recruit to the permanent position that is due to go back out to recruitment in early September. We've increased our specialist support across the council, and we've delivered some further awareness training sessions across the council. And we've improved our CDM access and advice to colleagues and officers across the council. Our current position is our governance arrangements are stronger than they were back in 2023. Our accountability is clearer, and our organisational awareness has improved significantly. However, construction remains a high hazard activity, and achieving consistent compliance across all projects requires us to continue a focus on our assurance. Our current risk score, as you can see from the report, is the likelihood is 3, the impact is 5 at major, which gives us a current risk score of 15. So our next steps are outlined in phase 2, which strengthens further our assurance in terms of those project assurance reviews, to do further compliance monitoring and some targeted audits and inspections. Our governance, we're embedding that across project categorisation framework, and we're strengthening our officer accountability, and we've started to establish a CDM steering group so it can be a more focused area of work. In terms of competence, we continue to target our training and recruit to that CDM compliance post, and we've introduced some competency requirements within that second phase. In addition, we look to improve our data and reporting by developing further KPIs, improve our compliance reporting, and monitor those F10 notifiable projects to the HSC and introduce some trend analysis. The framework is now largely in place. Our challenge is to ensure it's applied consistently across all projects so that we can demonstrate this through robust assurance and evidence. And as I say, we have made significant progress since 2023 instance, and we continue to build on that phase 1 programme.
Thank you very much, Christina. And thank you for presenting that so clearly. Do any of my colleagues have questions on this risk area? Nick.
Thank you for introducing that. Clearly, you will know that construction is the most dangerous industry in Britain right now, that more people die as construction workers than with any other employment, and that's what we're talking about. I just wonder if you could clarify for me that the risk seems to be written less that there's a risk that someone is going to die while they're working for us, and more that we're going to get blamed for it. And that seems to have the priorities the wrong way round. can this be reframed as about we care about the people working for us than the legal requirements of the construction design and management regulations?
Absolutely. Our health, safety and wellbeing strategy clearly sets out that our priority is the safety and health and wellbeing of our employees, our contractors and everybody that we service. I think the CDM framework is a very bureaucratic framework, not easily managed, and it's a difficult to navigate our way through. So absolutely, underneath all of this, the key thing is about ensuring that we protect those individuals, whether they are our employees, our citizens, or our contractors, from any injury.
So the risk has been framed in terms of we are not compliant with the regulations. Is there a separate risk on the register that someone is harmed while working for us? Or have we chosen to take that risk and frame it in legal terms?
We do have a number of risks on the risk register, which relate to making sure that people aren't harmed in terms of any of the undertaking that they undertake whilst being part of the council or in both Section 2 of the Health and Safety Work Act and Section 3. This particularly was around the framework of the CDM regulations.
Okay. I think we had a question from Joe. And then from James.
Thank you, Chair. So the risk rating of the item that's on our corporate risk register has gone from, 15, 10, and then up again to 15 over a period. That last jump is just over a period of a month, from November, assessing in November 25 to December 25. So in the context of what you've just outlined to us in terms of the progress that you've been making, can you, first of all, do you have any comment or explanation for that change that would have happened on the corporate risk assessment? Quite a large change over that month, November to December. And do you have any views about where that risk is headed, given the good progress picture you've just outlined for us?
The reason that it jumps, so when we look at the health and safety risks, we look at them at a monthly basis, not quarterly basis. So we use a risk register within our service as a very dynamic, so we don't wait until the quarter to go in and review that risk. In that current time, we had a couple of incidents that made us look at. One was working at height, and that made us review the impact and likelihood of that. We didn't quite have everything in place, and so we've used the risk register as a very dynamic assessment process to be transparent about where we are in terms of CDM. As I said before, the framework is a very wide framework, but getting the framework right and all of those individual elements within that framework right will actually end up protecting those individuals. I think that the likelihood we can reduce, the impact is always likely to stay high, in my opinion.
Okay, I think we had a question from James.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, a couple of questions. So the first question said that the first round of recruitment for the CDM manager, that failed. Was there just a lack of interest from industry, or were there no kind of good candidates? Or how is that process ongoing, and are you feeling quite confident that we'll get that CDM manager in soon, hopefully?
Okay. So the first round of candidates, I think it's really important not to recruit until you've got the right candidate, and we went out to recruitment locally. We weren't successful. Our next round of recruitment will go more nationally, so we'll open it up to a wider body of people. It is quite challenging at the moment to recruit both to CDM, and it's quite challenging to recruit to health and safety roles.
Yeah. Okay, great, thanks. And then looking ahead as well, I was just wondering, in terms of kind of enforcement and compliance for some of this works, basically what kind of scale of effort are we going to put into that? Are we going to be looking at potentially removing contractors who continue to breach the regulations off frameworks, or dismissing any staff? Is that something that we're going to see potentially being requirements in future for anyone who's not following the correct procedures in line with this?
I think our philosophy is, as I said, always to keep people safe and to support people. So if people don't understand what they should be doing, then we will support them and mentor them and coach them to get people to the right place. As part of that, we will continue to review the documentation and the guidance and the support we give to both our own staff and to contractors to make sure that we can work alongside them to make sure that everybody is working in a safe way.
Okay, great. Thanks. Thank you very much. Did you have a question, Shona?
It was only a quick one. It may not be covered by the CDM. I'm not an expert on it, but I was just struck. I was speaking to someone earlier today who was telling me about how suicide rates in the construction industry are almost 4 times as much as in the general population. And I just wondered whether there's any scope for this to include risk management around mental health and what support is provided, because obviously your mental well-being affects your performance on the job and could affect safety and people being able to follow procedures.
We have a separate risk which supports mental health and well-being of all our employees and colleagues and citizens that we work with. Part of the corporate health and safety team has a well-being function, and we also have a specialist mental health and well-being principal advisor. And we do continue to support, and suicide is one of the areas where we focused on recently. So we will continue to do that across all of our functions.
Okay, thank you. Was there a question from Ed?
Yes, thank you. So I specifically wanted to ask about the application of the impact score in the risk assessment, because obviously there's been a lot of movement in the last 2.5 years. So when it comes to any kind of risk where one of the potential impacts of it is loss of life, can I clarify what the minimum impact score that could be applied in those circumstances? Would it be 2, 3, 5, or 7, please?
It's a difficult one to answer, isn't it, somebody?
I think it's a very, very difficult one to answer, because I would think that if there's death, then I think it has to be the maximum impact, because there's death. So you can't, but I think it has to depend on the circumstances. But it's a very, very difficult one to answer. But my own personal view is that if the result is death, then the impact is significant. What probably we will be able to control is the likelihood rather than the impact.
Okay, that's fine, and I can see that what's been changing more recently has been the likelihoods, so that element isn't in question. But I'm concerned about that because you've just described that as being a significant impact, which I would, correct me if you would judge significant to be differently, and I respect that if that's the case. I would then judge the impact to be the maximum score of 7 in that case. It was raised to 7. In fact, it was 7 in 2024. and actually then fell as low as 3 in that stage. So I appreciate there might be some nuance to this, but I'm concerned about how that impact factor has been applied, particularly when we're discussing a risk which contains the impact of loss of life, and the risk of the impact being loss of life is not insignificant.
Chair, I think it's a fair discussion, but I think we would need to understand the circumstances of each of those risks. But when you talk about death, I think the impact is significant, but there could be other mitigating points probably.
I think Ed's completely right. Inherently, the impact is very high. So irrespective of the history that Christina's talked about, that began with, for want of a better phrase, a near miss, or an incident that wasn't a fatality, but potentially might have been a fatality, it's difficult to know what there's always a level of doubt there, but what we are dealing inherently with a risk of fatality, and therefore the inherent risk has got to be very high. So you're absolutely right to identify that.
Okay, so given that, is there actually a chance that this risk here might be reassessed and could end up with an even higher score than the recent escalation from 10 to 15? Because if the impact's judged at 7, then that is what we'd be talking about, right? That would be going back to 21.
I think I don't know how to say this. This is a very, very emotive. When you talk about death, it's an emotive subject. But you'd think that the impact may be low if you reduce the number of instances. So, but it's an emotive discussion, isn't it? So, if you've got probably 10 to 3 deaths, all those deaths are very, very important. But the number of the deaths probably may actually increase the impact of it. So there is something here in terms of when we look at this, are we talking about an incident or we are talking about incidents? So it's as I say, it's a very, very emotive.
No, I understand it's emotive, and I'm keen not to come across as emotive in the discussion of it. I realise we're essentially having a technical discussion here, but ultimately, that is what we're talking about, and so it's quite difficult to process the idea that I'm actually not questioning too much the impact given us 5 now. We're talking about a difference of 1 of the integers available, but I would then question why that risk was put as low as just 9 over just 18 months ago, and why that was the case. You would probably look at this and go, actually, even if the likelihood had been reduced to the minimum with all the controls possible, then actually the lowest score this could ever conceivably get is 7.
I think you make a very good point, Ed. I think that's right. Any more comments before we conclude this item, Joe, and then Nick?
Thank you. I mean, this is a deep dive report, yes? And I was just wondering about something that Christina said there about the underlying registers that you have. Obviously, there are, I presume, risks about this on the Directorate register, that is the Resources Directorate. And then there are maybe risks, maybe across the Council, on service risk registers. I'm just wondering, Chair, would it help if we had sight of those? Would it help our understanding? And I'm not talking about a heap of detail, but it would be good, wouldn't it, and informative, I think, to see those registers perhaps as they stand now. And you've talked about, obviously, it's a dynamic process in terms of your monitoring the risks. That's understood. But I think in terms of, this point that's just been made now, where does that risk get expressed, and where is it? I'm sure it's expressed across maybe a number of risks, actually, the fact that there could be a death. I'm just asking about those risks that you mentioned, and that there are several of them. I think that's information that would be useful for us as a committee in relation to this subject.
Do you have a comment on that, Christine?
We have, as part of the Corporate Risk Register, last year a separate health and safety risk portal was developed, and currently there are 21 health and safety risks on there, wide-ranging, which covers all of our key areas. That is available, so it's up to the chair
Is that available to us?
We could arrange a summary or a briefing if that were of interest. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. So thank you, Christina. I think there was a question from Nick.
Yes.
We may move on.
Sure. So this was a question which I think I gave to the chair and the clerk a week or so ago, which I hope made it to your team, that the standard industry approach to measuring health and safety is the number of incidents per hour worked, and you can use that to benchmark against other companies and industries. Do you have that information available for Bristol? What's our performance and how does that compare? What are we hoping for?
We do know the calculation, and at the current time we don't use that calculation, but if you would like us to, we can benchmark against other organisations and authorities.
It's not for me to instruct how this should be done. It should be for the project managers, but I have worked in construction for the last 10 years, and what you do is you count the number of incidents for the hours that you work, and I'm surprised that that's not how we manage risk.
Okay. Oh, and a question from Ellie.
Sorry, very quickly. It mentions benchmarking against good practice and peer organisations, so would that be one way of benchmarking, or are there other things that you'd be looking at for that?
Yes, we could benchmark. Yes, that's what it does mean.
Right. Thank you, Christina. Thank you, everyone. I think we are happy to note that report, and thank you for your attendance and your presentation. Thank you very much. So, on the theme of risk management, so we have the annual report for risk management, which, again, I think you're going to summarise some.
Thank you, Chair. This is an annual report that summarizes activities from 25-26. So section 1.12 should say that the following management actions were implemented during 25-26, not 24-25. The main message, Chair, is that progress has been made, but risk management still needs to be embedded. Some members will recall that in 24-25, internal audit gave a limited assurance on the effectiveness of the arrangements. A follow-up was undertaken in 25-26, which gave reasonable progress, with 7 of the 9 agreed actions that have been implemented, with the 2 ones being partially implemented. Chair, I'm able to report that those 2 remaining actions on page 87 have now been completed and closed. We have indicated some of the key improvements which were achieved in 25-26. In looking ahead, Chair, we would want to do some training which has been now developed and was launched in April. We want to improve the use of the risk management system, as well as aligning service planning more closely with the way we manage risk. And then lastly, Chair, I think that the direction of travel is positive, and the focus is ensuring that the revised framework is becoming constantly embedded, and where that can demonstrate that exposure is being reduced. I therefore invite the committee to note and ask me any questions if there are any.
Okay. Thank you, Simba. Did anyone have any questions on the annual report? So, starting with Shona and then Joe.
Thank you. Yeah, it was about those 2 actions you mentioned on page 87. I just wondered if you could clarify a bit, because I was quite surprised that the actions from over a year ago and they're still only partially implemented. They don't sound that complicated. So could you just clarify a bit more why it's taking so long?
So I think what Aldo did was, when he prepared the report, he took what was put in the internal audit report when it was done. When the internal audit report was completed, we had then done the risk workshop with CLB, and the risk management assurance policy had not been revised. You remember it came to the audit committee once, and then it was finally approved in March, I think. So that's the main reason why this has been put in, because we are reporting that at the time of the audit, there were 2 actions that were not completed, but they were finally done after the report has been done. It's just transparent, just to show that Yeah.
So are you saying that those actions have been completed?
Yeah, they've been completed now. Yeah, they've been completed.
Okay. I don't think that was massively obvious from the report. Okay, thank you.
Sorry, yeah, no, thanks. So they have been completed now, but they weren't at the time of writing, is what you're saying?
No, it's actually in the following, but it's not very apparent, but in the following table, it talks about the same actions, but that's an extract from an internal audit report that he had put in there.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Joe.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Simba. I might be repeating some of my colleagues' point here, but those two partially completed actions, and the first one, number 1 on page 87, can we just be clear again? Because I've been asking a lot about the risk appetite work that was being done, and Aldo has been responding to that, in his progress here through this subject with us. But, I mean, if there was a leadership team workshop on the 22nd of April to discuss the risk management approach, the risk appetite, again, sorry if I'm repeating the question, but why is there not more progress with that by now?
I think Simba has reported on that in the last question. So,
sorry, I didn't.
I think we've just been told that they have been actioned now.
Sorry?
I think we've been told that that's been completed.
It's been completed. Okay. So in our next update from Aldo, we will be able to see how the risk appetite is going to be applied.
I hope so. Yes. I think we should expect that. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Second question then is simply to ask the risk management assurance policy. Can you just confirm for us, where can we access that? Did we have an update on it maybe?
We can resend the policy. It was approved by the audit committee probably in March, I think, if I remember, probably in March.
Okay.
Yes, I need to apologize. I think there's something that probably has been missed here, but on page 87, there are two tables. There's the first table and then the second table. So you find that the item number 2 in the first table is the last item on risk training in the second table.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so yeah, and I think in Q2, Chair, we have been working with CLB to reflect the corporate risk report. So what we'll do in Q2, we're going to bring you 2 reports. One to look at what we've been doing and the changes that we want to make, and then the comparison between the current risk register and the refreshed risk register that we are working on with the corporate leadership team. And then we explain to the members how the two have been made. If there are any residual risk, then we also explain. So it's going to be probably a longer report, just explaining the changes that have happened as a result of the risk management policy.
Thank you, Simba. And I think we had a question from Ed.
Thank you. Yes, just a couple of things. So firstly, I'll repeat what both Joe and Shona have said on the management actions. It's one of these examples where, because of the inevitable time lag between us receiving reports and the action themselves being completed, it looks as if we're waiting on something to be done that has been done. So if there was some kind of way of clarifying that, that would be a standard way of clarifying that. That would be very helpful. Page 85, there's a sentence, I've got it in my notes and I've neglected to remind myself exactly where it is in the page. I think it's under 1.12. The following management actions were implemented during the 24-25, and then it stops. I assume that's year. So it'd be good if that can be corrected. And then page 86, just under 1.13, can I just clarify, what's the difference between reasonable assurance and reasonable progress? Does that mean that what's being given here is still limited assurance rather than reasonable assurance? Because the term reasonable progress isn't one that I think we familiarly use.
So limited assurance is an opinion that is one of the 4 possible opinions we give after a full audit. Reasonable progress talks about when we have done a detailed review of the actions that were supposed to have been implemented. So when we do a follow-up of the work that has been done, we give reasonable progress because we are following up on previously agreed management actions. When we do a detailed re-audit or a complete review, we give the limited assurance or the reasonable assurance, or no progress or limited progress.
Okay, thank you. So this refers to essentially a different rating system, but it may be as a result of that that a future report comes back that says there is now reasonable assurance, but we're not quite there yet.
Yes. So so I think we are there yet, but remember we do annual audits. So we undertake an annual audit of risk management every year. So there is going to be another audit this year, which will give a complete assurance.
Okay, so that sounds like more than reasonable progress then.
Yeah, there won't be. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments on this question, Peter? Can you put your microphone on, please?
Sorry. The last question rather begs the issue as to what criteria is used in risk management to go from, as you say here, reasonable progress to reasonable assurance. What's the criteria that you use in order to make these judgmental statements?
I think Simba has explained. You've described the criteria for reasonable assurance or limited assurance in the summary report.
Yes. So I think just to help you there, I think when you are doing a follow-up, you have a list of all the actions you have a list of the findings and the actions. So you follow up on the actions seeking evidence to see where they are in the implementation of agreed management actions. So at the time of the review, we found that 7 out of the 9 actions had been implemented, and those 2 were still outstanding. So there was reasonable progress. And we could actually see that there were conversations between management in terms of going, and we have seen the draft risk management policy, although we were saying it's not yet there, but we have seen it gone even through the audit committee. So that's the criteria that gave us the confidence to say there's reasonable progress in implementing previously agreed actions.
Okay. Thank you. If there are no further questions, I believe we can note that report. It's just gone 5 o'clock. I had naively assumed that we might finish before 5 o'clock today, but that's never happened before, so I don't know why I was so confident. Yes, quite right. We have one item left, which we do need to cover because we actually need to make a decision about whether we are happy to progress this report to full council. But I'm conscious if anyone needs to leave for various reasons, you should do that. But as long as we are quorate, if people are able to stay for another 15 minutes, then I would hope that we can conclude this item. Thank you. That's really appreciated. So the final item is our annual report. So once a year, and thank you to Nick, not twice a year, we summarise what this committee has been doing. So this is our opportunity to comment on the work that we did up until for the previous 12 months. Grateful to Simba for some of the preparatory work, grateful to Nick for initial comments which have strengthened the report. But it's not my report, it's all of our reports. So this is our opportunity to look at it and see, are there any issues that we would like to develop, or are there any elements that we'd like to give more prominence to? I think that I would hope that the factual bits are factual, but there may be some elements that you wish to give more prominence to. Nick and then Ed.
Thank you. So paragraph 4.5 contains the sentence, members were pleased to see that transparency over the City Council's improvement plans in this area had improved. So are we feeling happy that our information governance is improving? Because I would strike that sentence out, I'm afraid. And I also note that this paper covers the period in which we had the secret briefing on the Stepping Up programme, in which we weren't allowed to see the internal audit report, but that happened in April, which is well within the financial year which this applies to. So I think that Stepping Up needs to feature in this year's report as well, as it will do in next year's report, now that we've actually got the content of that document.
Would you like to suggest some wording that you'd like to add there?
I can send something out by email afterwards. Otherwise, I can have a think while we're discussing this one.
Yeah, I think we should absolutely do that. I agree with you, and I had wanted to draw attention to the fact that the compliance with transparency, so FOI and SAR, has such an important aspect for this committee, and at the point of seeing the report, I had felt confident that was improving. I think it has actually improved compared to the year before, which I think is the point being made. But it is certainly the case that it remains an area of concern. So the sentence that says it will remain an area of concern and continue to be monitored, I think is extremely important, even if we take out the sentence before that, which I would be happy to say. Ed.
Nick, you might want to get writing. I'll try and buy as much time for you as possible. So, firstly, very, very small detail. Just chart 3.3 with the attendance figures on there. I'm going to be fastidious. So, myself, Ellie, and Cam. I'll let Tom speak for himself later. Did attend 5 of the 6 meetings. I did note that myself and Ellie did send substitutes for our meetings, so mine was Councillor Pulteney, and Ellie, I think yours was Councillor McAllister, but actually I had a look through the various minutes and it wasn't actually recorded who the sub was, but I think it was Councillor McAllister. So if that can be recorded in there, because substitutes were provided, I would appreciate that. And then page 101, so I'm just going to find the... So the committee discussed whistleblowing matters relating to controls for direct payments and noted that a proper audit would be required to test control effectiveness with outcomes to be reported to a future committee. So that's point 4.35 under the counter fraud arrangements and whistleblowing. Can I just ask when that's going to come to this committee? Because having a look at the plan for this year, it's not on there.
No, just making the point that 435 refers to whistleblowing, and when is that on the current work plan for internal audit?
Chair, I think I need to check, but I think it's in the last half of the year when we do the direct payments.
Okay.
That's when we will do. So if the committee wants us to bring the report, regardless of the opinion, we'll bring the report here.
Oh, so even if it gives reasonable assurance?
Yes, yeah, because
potentially we might bring it anyway.
Because it has been asked, the members have asked for it, so it's fine.
Sorry, can you clarify what the response is, please, Simba? I didn't hear the response.
Simba's saying two things. First of all, it is in the work programme for this year for the internal audit team. Normally, the team only bring reports to the committee if they're limited assurance or no assurance, but we could actually bring the report anyway, even if it's reasonable assurance.
Right, okay, yeah. It's only because it explicitly says that report will be watched committee regardless.
Exactly that.
Which is fine. I mean, I would accept a briefing note as an alternative, but then perhaps that needs to be amended in here to say it will be brought as a briefing note if it is, if it does get complete assurance, but otherwise it comes.
Yes.
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, it's okay. Yeah.
We will refer to that being presented to the committee. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
I think that's really important. A question from Joe.
It's a suggestion, actually, Chair. This is a very good report. I find it very comprehensive, certainly much better than others that I've seen, and it's very well set out. What I think it would benefit from, though, is the key messages part on page, whatever that is, page 5 of the report, page 97. I think there's a lot of detail here, a lot of, paragraphs. I think this would benefit from being presented in a table so that you can see, we separate out the messages and the conclusions that the committee drew and the further comments, because there's 2 bits going on. There's 3 bits going on. One is, what did we look at in terms of the report? What material did we look at? What did we agree with? What did we approve? And then we've got a third element which talks about what recommendations for changes we're making. And I simply think that maybe a more concise and succinct presentation of all that great information could be achieved in a table just to aid the the council ultimately in seeing.
Thank you for the comment, Joe. I think we have a table on the previous page, which is to summarise the elements that have been brought here. What we wanted to do was to have an opportunity, hopefully as succinct as possible, depending on Nick's draftsmanship, in terms of what we want readers in the full council to hear in terms of elements and patterns that we've identified. And this is our opportunity to say what those things are. It shouldn't be our opportunity to summarise everything that we've done. We should highlight what we've done, and then we should draw out the conclusions or the issues that we want to draw attention to. I'd struggle to do that in a table, but it's a helpful suggestion.
Well, I think that
thank you.
Given the heading, which talks about key messages, I just think the key messages are kind of a little obscure, and they're only obscured because of the narrative. You know, that's all I'm saying. And I think those key messages could be a bit sharper. That's all.
Point taken.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Nick would really like some other comments.
Right, the first paragraph, this is what happened during the period. Members received a confidential briefing on the Stepping Up programme, which had been requested during the previous period. This briefing did not include disclosure of the internal audit report which had been sought. The Chair summarised the information available to the committee in a statement to the May 2025 meeting. The committee still have concerns about the commissioning of the Stepping Up programme and the subsequent difficulty in obtaining the relevant information. Next paragraph, more controversial. It has since come to light that the internal audit report was sought by a member of the public by Freedom of Information, which was refused by BCC. This was subsequently overturned by the Information Commissioner, and the report has been published. It is not consistent with the briefing given to the committee. The Council's external auditors were not provided with a copy of the report during their investigations into the programme.
Can you supply that in writing, please? Thank you.
I think the clerk would particularly appreciate that being sent non-verbally. Can you read the sentence that's got "it was not consistent with"? That's the thing that I think we need to be the clearest about.
It is not consistent with the briefing given to the committee. So I've looked over your statement from the committee meeting, and it talks about the procurement issues, but I've also looked over the auditor's report, and that says that the council provided staff to the programme over the course of 3 years for free, and it also says that Bristol Waste, a council-owned company, provided accommodation to the Stepping Up programme for about 5 years, also presumably for free. And the report says that we don't know how much has been spent on the Stepping Up programme because records weren't kept of these gifts from the council to a limited company. And I don't think that information was shared with us at our briefing last April. I feel I would have remembered it. I don't know if anyone else here has the same recollection.
I don't think any of us for Green Reps were actually the reps who were at that briefing anyway, because I think most of us came in May 2025, and the very first thing we heard was the notice you gave.
I'm happy to accept Nick's wording. I think that describes what we've done. Jonathan.
Thanks, Chair. This is going back a bit earlier in time, but I think it's relevant to our considerations. At the November 2024 Audit Committee, the committee requested that an independent external legal investigation should take place into Stepping Up, but this request was refused by the council.
As I've said, I'm happy to accept Nick's wording of that report if colleagues are. Yeah.
I'll try and find an email to reply all and send that round.
Yeah, but the principle that we're being asked today, are we happy to accept the report that we've seen subsequent to the alterations that Nick is suggesting?
So just to check, are we making a decision now? Because if we are making a decision, yeah, I prefer to take a 2-minute adjournment so we can read the text and confirm. I suspect we will confirm, but in the interest of getting the procedure right and not ending up delaying this by months by accident.
On the procedural point, do we need to vote for an amendment and then?
So,
yeah.
Well, I guess there are two options, therefore. So, yes, we could have an adjournment and read that. I guess the other thing is that the committee agrees to agree. The other option is that the committee agrees to delegate the wording of that report to both Nick and myself, so that we complete wording which is consistent with the request that Nick has made. Sorry, a comment, Joe.
Can we just be very clear that we get the dates captured in the amendment? I think you did mention dates, Councillor Coombs, but I'm not quite sure. Because it's just important to note that I, for example, wasn't a member when this was considered. And so I think the dates of when things happened, when reports and when discussions and when requests were made is clear. And the second question I would ask, and this isn't for now, but should we be pointing to any other committee of the council that may have scrutinised this situation? I don't know.
So the dates, it's the 25-26 financial year. So the 25-26 year. So
yeah, yes, but my second point is that
March 26. In terms of other provinces or other committees, I don't think so.
Scrutiny committee somewhere? No.
No.
Okay.
I would never always recommend filibustering, but now could be a good time. Got it, Nick.
entirely in opposition to. What I think you're saying is that it wasn't entirely consistent, or not wholly consistent, which I think is more the point that you're trying to make. Is that fair? I think, so what I would say is, I think the principle that Nick's raising here is completely right. Is this issue was something which has detained us during this year, and we should draw attention to it, and I think you've done a good job of summarising it. So I'm basically happy to include the wording that you've set out. I am a little worried about the phrase "not consistent." I would be more comfortable with not wholly consistent, or not entirely consistent, because I think that leaves open the possibility that it was entirely inconsistent, which I don't think is what you meant. What would you be happy to include?
I can agree, not entirely consistent. The two reports are now both public. Your summary of the report that you hadn't seen and the report itself are now both public documents, so people can read them together and see where the consistencies are and what was omitted. Yeah. Okay. Once more, I'm doing track changes.
Okay.
So, Nick, I think you now need to move it as an amendment.
Yep, very well. I move an amendment that the text recently circulated is added to the report, and the sentence in 4.5, saying members were pleased to see that transparency over the City Council's improvement plans in this area had improved, is deleted. So one sentence out, two new paragraphs added.
So just a minor point, Nick. The sentence, what's currently the final sentence, the one that says, however, information governance remains an area of concern, we also need to remove the word however. But the rest of that sentence stays.
Okay, could I make a clarification for Nick's benefit? So what would happen? So I think what you are trying to move is that the sentence members were pleased to see transparency over, etc. That sentence is removed from 4.5. The word however, comma, is also removed in order to create grammatical sense. And then between 4.5 and 4.6, two new paragraphs are added with the information that Nick has circulated. And if that were the case, I'll be happy to second.
So that motion has been proposed. And seconded. So everyone in favour of that proposal? No.
No.
You're not. Fine. So, sorry, thank you. So that amendment has been carried unanimously. Can I therefore also ask, following that amendment, are we happy to accept the report and forward it to full council in September? Everyone in favour, please vote. So that's also unanimous. Thank you very much. That was a much, certainly longer and more interesting, well, not more interesting, I also could be interesting. Thank you for your perseverance, and we've done our job. Thank you very much. See you, if not before, in September.